I need for you to sign this on the side there. I started to sign it, it's on the side. To approve it, because it's over 50,000.
Right here?
Yes.
A tiny little space.
What's that?
It's a tiny little space.
Yes. Is it because you have a short name? Or was it just does not have 3 syllables. Thank
Dark hair first row, top up through. We will call the May 21st regular meeting of the Bennington Springs City Council to order. Awesome. Actually, I was going to get you before you sat down. Would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? You only need to know the first word or so.
Okay. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight, Council. Thank you for being here. Appreciate the audience members here as well. We do have a lot on the agenda this evening, so we will try to be as efficient as possible. Every week we kind of sort of take a bet about what time we'll get out, and I'm going to shoot for 9:30 at the latest. So you can help me with that. Yes, ma'am.
was just hearing.
Yeah, she was voting for that. Apparently there was a motion to approve that decision. Roll call.
Mayor Dre.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Fortune.
Present.
Councilman Smith.
Present.
Councilwoman Elder. Here. Councilwoman Wolbert.
Here.
Councilman Todd.
Excused.
Councilman Rohr.
Here. All right, item D, approval of the agenda. Currently there is at least one item that we would like to add to the agenda. Councilman Ward, would you?
Sure. I move that we approve the agenda with 2 additions. One, add an item 4 to the consent calendar. City Council accepts Chief Ribeiro's retirement letter with his last day being May 31st. Second one is insert a new item 7 to new business, renumbering the remaining items. And it's City Council extend the contract to Bob Todd to be our city administrator and directing our interim city administrator to negotiate the terms of the contract using our last contract offer as a guide.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
So motion and a second, any further discussion? We'll vote against that motion, particularly with regard to item 7. I don't believe there's been any notice or any notice with regard to that item whatsoever, so that is the reason for my vote concerning that item. All right. Next item, public comments on non-agenda items. We do provide an opportunity for the public to comment on agenda items, on non-agenda items, something that's not on for this evening. So if anybody would like to comment for a couple of minutes, Ms. Koba.
Mayor Duray, council members, I just wanted to introduce our new wastewater superintendent, Rich Fabro. This is his 4th week here, and he's doing a great job, and I just wanted you all to be able to put a face with the name. So this is Rich.
Wonderful, thank you for joining us.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, John.
Anything else? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council Dale Laddie, 511 High Street. I wanted to bring to your attention the observation that I made behind the middle school. A couple of months ago, actually, we've had a discussion about that. And then also I had seen some other community members over there in the interim period. And it still seems to be the same condition after the construction. Ms. Cobal may have some more on that, but the trail, the Intamin Trail is not well recovered after that project. I was also very disappointed to see that we had another such a large impact on that valley, which will serve whatever purpose it does. I never saw a flood back there in 25 years, but anyway, we need to get the Intamin Trail looked at. I know we've got people that we don't have Mr. Jordan over here anymore, like the Intamin Trail Committee used to keep up with it, but if somebody could take a look at that trail section, the community would be a lot better served. Have you been over there since we mentioned it?
I have.
Okay. And then also along the same lines, I took my first trip of the year up the Ute Trail through the gate by my pass, and there's still significant need for a remediation up there. There's been a lot of chipping, and the chipping is not actually being spread on the ground, it's being piled up to be apparently hauled away. And there's a lot of ground uncovered in terms of the ground that was impacted through the installation of that pipeline. So I just want to bring that to your attention. I'm glad we got a new superintendent. Water, Kurt Griesby also knows that road very well, sir. I've known it for 25 years, 30 years. And we have a lot of work left to do. I don't know how the money ran out or if there is money that has run out, but it is a project that was let go before it was finished. And we had a conversation about that on the walk the other day, Mr. Mayor. So thank you very much.
Mr. Bladden, thank you. Ms. Ashley, perhaps you might find a particular appropriate staff member to check into those two issues.
Okay.
Let us know what you find.
I can open up this list too, because there are always other trials, and I know already been working on it. Didn't come up last night, but.
Open space.
Yeah, open space, that's kind of in their purview.
Anyone else? Any comments on non-agenda items? Okay, good. Consent calendar. We've added an item number 4, acceptance of the chief's retirement letter. We'd entertain a motion concerning the consent calendar. There are 3 items on there: approval of minutes for May 7th, consideration approval of a professional service contract with Beers Construction, and consideration of a $76,000 professional service agreement with Agave Landscape and Masonry, and then the 4th item, acceptance of the chief's retirement. Would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. All right. Item H1, hearings. Consideration of an application for a transfer of a hotel and restaurant liquor license at 915 Manitou Avenue, Suites 1A, 1B. Ranta Group LLC, DBA Babu Kitchen and Bar. Babu, I'm not gonna pronounce the last name right. Shrisha?
Sister.
Thank you. Applicant. Ms. Cass, would you like to introduce that item?
Okay, so as stated in the title, Retina Group LLC, doing business as Babu's Kitchen and Bar, has applied for approval of a transfer and hotel restaurant liquor license at 915 Manitou Avenue. There's a very detailed report in your packet, so I'm not going to restate everything that's in there. I'll just hit a couple highlights. The property was formerly occupied by PJ's Bistro, who have subsequently gone out of business. And so our applicant is applying to obtain the existing liquor license by means of a transfer. The LLC has one sole member, and that's Mr. Babu Shrestha. And he is here in attendance, as you know. He's able to answer any questions you may have. You should know that the property was posted on May the 8th, and a notice was published in the newspaper on May the 9th, informing the public that a hearing would be held this evening on this application. No public comment was received. So, as stated in my written report, the applicant has met all of the requirements. The only exception up to this point is the building is still being renovated, so because of that, he has not yet been able to obtain a food service license or business license, and so those things are still pending. So I would recommend that should you want to approve this application, that you prove it contingent upon submission of those three, also the sales tax license, food service license, and business license. I recommend approval contingent upon submission of copies of those three licenses. That's it.
Any questions for Ms. Cass? If not, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If the applicant would like to come on up and introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening everybody. Sir and madam, this is Babu Shrestha, and I have a business in Manitou Avenue since 4 or 5 years before. I have a handicraft business there, and when I come here I saw a lot of crowds and lot of people wants to new food around the Manitou Avenue and Manitou Spring. So then I decided to, why not I open a Nepalese food and Indian food, and especially from the Himalayas. And so I decided to open. Then I hunting for this space, and finally I got this space, and I decided to open, and I apply my liquor license, food license, everything on the process, and finally I got health department, they approved for my space to go ahead to open the restaurant, and waiting for the liquor license from here, and I hope that you will approve today. And I want to brief about my food, what I am serving here. We especially serve the buffet with the rice, naan, and chicken, tandoori chicken curry, you may know that. And with the spice, mostly we use turmeric, which is good for the health, fight for the disease, and garlic as an antibiotic, we consider like that. And ginger, we mostly use this spice, and mainly most of the ingredients is maybe organic. We import from the India and Nepal, which is also available in here in Indian market. So that is my.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank
Is there
you.
anyone in the audience interested in this topic who would like to testify for or against this particular application? All right, seeing no one at the podium, we will move past the party and interest portion. Obviously, we don't need any rebuttal by the applicant. Any questions from council?
I'd like to make an order.
You know, on Shark Tank, they bring samples. Would entertain a motion concerning this item.
I move council approve the application for a transfer of a hotel and restaurant liquor license, excuse me, at 915 Manitou Avenue, Suites 1A and 1B, Ratna Group LLC, DBA Babu's Kitchen and Bar. Babu Shrestha, applicant, And this is contingent on acquiring the sales tax license, the food license, and the business license. Where's Don?
Wonderful.
Did I cover all those? Okay.
You did. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a motion, a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Congratulations. When will you,
Thank you very much.
when will you be opening?
As soon as possible, maybe first week of the June.
Wonderful.
Okay.
We'll look forward to checking it out.
We would like to invite you all to the my restaurant.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, we're coming.
Opening zero.
Item H1, resolution number 0919, resolution in support of Neighbor Up Month in Manitou Springs. We have several representatives from CONA, the Council of Neighbors Organizations. We have Sarah and Matt. We also have Allison Gervick, who's here, and
Julaine.
hi, Julian. How are you? So, very quickly, tell us a little bit about Neighbor Up Month and the resolution that we're about to consider.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah Voss. I work at CONO, which stands for Council of Neighbors and Organizations. We're a nonprofit that serves El Paso and Teller County neighborhoods. So we work with neighborhoods, and Neighbor Up Month, the entire month of September, is a way for neighbors to connect. We want people to help them build relationships, have fun, get outside, do a block party, a park picnic, a cleanup, an ice cream social, whatever it is. And CONO is here to help. We're here to help be the kind of event coach, and also we have a list of kind of those preferred vendors, and if you need some help with ideas and local businesses, and CONO actually has barricades, so we have those event barricades that you can set up. But it looks like we might hold off on some block parties because your streets are a little bit different than City of Colorado Springs. That's where I spend most of my time. But you might wonder why we're talking about September, and it's May 21st. And just briefly, there was a flyer that I put outside for anyone that wanted to pick up. June 21st is the first day of summer, a month away from now. Hopefully it's nice and sunny. And we are basically, CONO is holding our own block party. It's kind of a model block party for you to come, check out the resources, ask us questions, but also participate in a cornhole tournament. It's a fundraiser for CONO, bounce houses, beer garden, face paint, all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm inviting you guys to be there and participate, but get ready and start planning for September and for those fun events to connect with your neighbors and just get to know each other in a better way and work better together.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure. And I'm Allison Gervig. I live at 314 Terrace Place, and my neighbor Julaine, who
I live at 317 Terrace Place, right across the street.
And you've lived there for 40-some?
50-some years.
50-some years. So when I moved there about 15 years ago, so we met as neighbors. We're right across the street, and in 2009 we started planning neighborhood parties. And I was telling Kim that for Easter I was planning like a scavenger hunt. So my son, when we started these parties, was 2, and he's going to be 12. So 10 years. So I had emailed all the neighbors. I was telling my coworkers, I emailed all the neighbors to ask if the kids could be in their yard. And my neighbor said, how do you have everybody's email? And I said, because almost 10 years ago, Julaine and I went door to door to all the neighbors. Becky Elder is one of them, and said, hey, we're your neighbors and we want to have a party. So we'll be having our 10th annual neighborhood party coming up in July, but we wanted to definitely.
We do twice a year.
Yes. So our second will be in September. So we were really excited to have this opportunity, and I don't know if you want us to read that resolution, or how do you do when you do resolution stuff?
Reads the resolution. Would you like to read it?
Me? No.
Please.
Do I? Maybe we share it.
You're the pro.
I'll read the parts, and you read some of the parts.
And Kevin's
When it talks about like,
okay.
oh no. I
Okay.
don't know where it is. Here it is.
Police department.
Okay. So we are asking for a resolution in support of Neighbor Up Month in Manitou Springs. Whereas neighborhoods are the building blocks of communities and one of the basic units of democracy in America, and whereas the city of Manitou Springs strives to celebrate, support, protect, and foster a creative and interconnected community, and whereas the city of Manitou Springs provides multiple opportunities that allow residents of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities to uniquely contribute to the well-being and enhancement of our community, and
Whereas whereas the Council of Neighbors and Organizations is a local nonprofit organization that empowers neighbors within the Pikes Peak region to take action in their communities through education and connection, and whereas Kono is actively working with the City of Manitou Springs to help create an environment for meaningful public process, healthy conversations, and community building, and whereas the City of Manitou Springs and Kono are working to empower neighborhood leaders and connect people within and across neighborhoods to build relationships and share knowledge, and whereas Kono's 5th annual Neighbor Up Month will take place during the month of September 2019, reducing barriers to connect neighbors across the region to build relationships and become more involved in their neighborhoods through the use of neighborhood parks and block parties and civic dinners. And do you want to read the last official
Keep going.
time?
You're crushing it.
Do you want to?
All
You
right.
can wrap it up.
All right, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Manitou Springs that City Council hereby declares the month of September 2019 as Neighbor Up Month in Manitou Springs and expresses its appreciation for Kono's vital work in support of the city's neighborhoods and its citizens.
Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome.
Council,
Good job.
Good
any
job.
questions of anyone here or concerning the resolution? If not, we'd entertain a motion.
I move council adopt resolution number, 0919, a resolution in support of Neighbor Up Month in Manitou Springs.
Any motion, is there a second? Second. Motion is second, any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Did I
We're going to
understand
do
correctly?
another photo though.
Did you want to come up real quick and take
Yes.
a picture? Come on up.
Can you actually take the photo with my camera? Thanks.
Come on, Julie.
Now, no bunny ears or anything.
No bunny ears.
And by the way, my sign is crossed out. It was a week. It is now a whole month.
A month.
So
Yeah.
we're on this program, so it's
You can
awesome.
do it on the road.
Yeah.
Council members in there too.
Stand in front of me if you want.
Yeah, you want to get down a little bit, that's fine.
I'll pop
There you go.
That's perfect. 1, 2, 3. It's serious.
Thank you for your
Thank you so
professional
much.
service.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
I would add, if anyone is interested in helping these folks organize, we have at least one other individual that's stepped up, wants to organize. The intention is to have some sort of an event in each neighborhood, but also I think Allison is looking for some help in trying to find those folks and help support them. So if anybody's interested in either hosting an event, contact either myself or Allison, or interested in helping to organize the overall event.
Yes.
So, great.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Yeah.
All right, item H2, consideration of appointment of Andrea? There you are. Andrea. I knew I'd get it right, Satella, to be appointed as an alternate member of the Open Space Advisory Committee. Satella, how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Excellent, welcome. Any questions for Ms. Satella? Am I pronouncing the last name?
You're doing, yep.
Okay.
I would just like to say your resume looks excellent, and you're, obviously, I know you guys, and unfortunately Corey has applied a couple of times, but he's not a United States citizen, so he is ineligible to be on, but I would say you're at least as good as Corey. So, I'm sure, and Mike has written you a very good recommendation.
Thank you for going through that process as well. All right. Is there a motion?
Well, you know, it's done by 9:30.
You better get going.
So, I move council consider the appointment of Andrea Satella, thank you, as an alternate member of the Open Space Advisory Committee.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I noticed there's a jacket down below your seat.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming to the meeting last night. That was an interesting meeting, wasn't it?
Yes.
Very lively.
Item H3, Pikes Peak Center Marathon presentation. Gentlemen?
Thank you. We will show a short video. It's
All
only
right, just
1
go ahead and
minute.
introduce yourselves.
I am Ron Elgin, president of Pikes Peak Marathon. And
I'm Jeff Mosier, the event manager.
And we want to, kind of make you aware of what's new this year. Yeah, if you could go to that website, please.
Oh, to the website.
But while you're doing that, I can fill you in. Basically, first I want to thank the city for all of its support through the many years, and especially last year with the challenges we had with sinkholes and weather, etc. We greatly appreciate that. But I'd like to share with you and make you aware of the stature of the Pikes Peak Marathon throughout the running world. Following last year's success, it's the second year that we're one of 6 elite mountain races in a World Championship Series, and we'll run the video of that. And the goal of this is to truly attract the best in the world to have a true championship race. And this year, we already have 30 of the top athletes in the world coming to compete. One of them, who's considered the best mountain runner in the world, and basically Matt Carpenter's heir apparent, is coming to break Matt's record, so it should be very exciting. And with that, I'd like to, if you would scroll down a little bit there. There, right there, Golden Trail Series, click on that, please. That was last year's race winner, and scroll down, that's the guy coming to challenge Matt Carpenter, Killian Jornet. Not that one, the next one down, right there, there he is again. So. Is there sound? Oh, there's uplifting sound. Anyway, this runs through the top races that are in this series. You already saw a clip of that. There it is. So you have these races. So, thank you for indulging me in that, but I just wanted you to see that where Pikes Peak stands, and to be amongst some of these races. The Marathon du Mont Blanc is just an amazing race, and those others. It's really quite the honor. Any race would want to be part of this series. But because of this honor, we're really working on upping our game. We don't, the course is pretty much the same, but we're upping the supporting events, especially starting the post-race marathon block party, where last year we shut down Manitoulin and had a very nice event. We're planning to do the same this year. And with that, I want to turn it over to Jeff to talk to you about that.
Yeah, so this is going to look, we're a weekend back further out in the summer because of other races around the country and international races. We're kind of stuck with what weekends we can work with. So
what weekend?
we bumped it back to August. It's the 22nd through the 25th is when our activities will be taking place. And so what we're expecting to do, we've met with Leslie over at the Chamber of Commerce. We're going to do very similar to what we did last year, face-to-face meetings with all the businesses, and invitations to all the businesses to have booths down on the 900 block of Manitou Avenue. That's the section we close for the block party. The 1000 block is also closed, but that's for the finish line and some equipment and things like that. And part of the 800 block is closed just because of traffic flow. So Canyon and Park will once again go to a two-way traffic, and we'll use Hickenbotham Flats and the regular parking areas that we've used in the past as well. We've been really fortunate this year, and this is not 100% guaranteed yet, but we're pretty solid on signing the contracts. We have a local television station that has decided to really pick this up. as an event for them. They're gonna do a food truck rally as part of the block party and actually market Manitou Springs for at least a week prior to the event. They wanna do a little segment called a Manitou Minute during their newscast and kind of do some stories on some of the runners, what's going on in Manitou, the setup, and lead up into a full news coverage or news broadcast, not news coverage, but news broadcast. So they're gonna do, hopefully, their morning Sunday news from Manitou Avenue, and the start will be part of that news process. And with that, we expect to have a lot more pedestrian traffic downtown for the block party. So we're really excited about that, and especially the lead-up stories. We're also meeting with them with some discussions of wrap-up stories on how some of the runners did and how the city did and things like that. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity to expand that block party and get a little bit more participation. And then we're gonna connect with the city, the block party or the neighborhood party group as well and say, hey, we're doing the pancake breakfast with the fire department again. Memorial Park will be very similar. Run Fest is on Thursday, so that's a community event. Come down and listen to the band play and have a beer. We're teaming up with the market. They're gonna come down and be positioned in 7 Minute Springs, the park right across the street on Thursday as well. So we're hoping to attract a lot different crowd. And again, like Ron said, there's so many international folks that like this run. We're looking at bringing those folks in as well. And so they can have an experience unlike anything they've had anywhere else. Manitou's a pretty unique community, so it's going to be fun to hear what their feedback is from other races around the world. So I think I covered. Oh, during the block party, we're gonna pick up the number of artist booths. We've had some local businesses already step up and say they want to not only be involved with the block party, but they want to be involved Thursday through Sunday. So they're going to be part of the expo center as well. And then we're going to bring in a lot of local artists and have artist booths along with the food trucks, along with the sidewalk sale and the local businesses. So we're pretty excited about seeing how big this thing can grow. And having the opportunity to close the street with the cog down is great. It's a huge advantage for us. So, and that's about it. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Miller, Mr. Elgin? Yes.
Thank you. I love the food truck idea. We often have food trucks with festivals, but I really want to make sure that our local restaurants, because we don't really do, or have a mobile ability, I'd really like to make sure.
If they're licensed for it, that's one of the tricks is they have to be licensed to do it because it's a different license, and you don't want to hurt their health license. But one of the things we're doing with some of the local businesses is we're as part of the event, and we did it last year. We had a camera at the summit. We're going to have 5 cameras on the course this year with the large screen TV. We're going to be able to broadcast in some of the establishments and hopefully drive traffic that way. And they're going to be almost exclusive, only certain businesses downtown. It'll be the bars and restaurants that can do that. We did team up with the Chamber. On Saturday night, they're going to do a silent disco. I know they do a couple of them a year, so they're going to do that in Soda Springs Park as part of the marathon week. And they're also doing a food truck event that night too. So we're going to have back-to-back food truck events. Trying to get as many, I believe in using the local food trucks. So if we have people downtown that have food trucks or the ability to vend, they're definitely in. No cost. We don't want to charge. We want them to have a booth.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
This is
Thanks.
information line a moment. So we appreciate you giving us a heads up of what's coming.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. We'll call item H4, resolution number 1019, resolution approving the continuity of government succession plan. Chief, I think this was your item initially, or Ms. Ash. The intention of this item is just to clarify. We already have a continuity of operation plan in place. My understanding of the intent of this is just to clarify which one of the council members are in order in the event that we need to do something.
Well said, Mayor. We were just kind of general in the continuity of operations planning. It said senior council member, and that conflicts with 5 of you. So we, by name, put the council members in, and then you'll do that again when the new council is instantiated in January.
It was pointed out to us that perhaps we need to change the order of seniority to have Councilman Rohr listed after Councilman Smith. my understanding in terms of the tenure on council.
No, Becky was on before I was.
Okay. I don't know exactly, let's say, how do we have that? So that is the correct order or no?
Close enough.
Close enough? All right. Any questions for the chief? If not, would entertain a motion concerning resolution 1019.
I move we approve resolution number 1019, a resolution approving a continuity of government succession plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Item H5, resolution number 1119, a resolution demonstrating commitment to incline management. Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, would you like to give the background on this?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see, the Transportation and Parking Board, submitted a while ago some concerns about the fact that folks weren't paying enough attention really to the incline issues that the city experiences, particularly those negative impacts of the, incline. So they put forward, their concerns to come to city council. As a result of that, we met, Mayor and I met with, various people from Ruxton Avenue and the chair of the parking board, and determined that there were some various courses of action, but probably the most appropriate course of action at this point in time would be to pass a resolution that would show our commitment to reinvigorating and accelerating our actions pertaining to improving things pertaining to the incline. I can say that in the past probably month or so, meetings have been started again between our staff and Colorado Springs, so that's very encouraging. Additionally, Colorado Springs has hired additional rangers who will be working on the incline, which I think will help in any number of ways. In fact, our planning director has been taking the lead on this, has established a good relationship with the Colorado Springs Parks and Rec Department. But nonetheless, we thought it would be good if council showed our commitment to it as well and worked toward it. So this was the result of really that meeting.
All right. Any other questions or comments concerning resolution number 1119?
I think it's fantastic. First step. Glad to hear Colorado Springs is stepping up a little bit.
Yes, me too.
We've been pleased at that communication and just hope to expand that. So this will be a good foundational piece for it. Any other questions or comments? If not, would entertain a motion concerning resolution 1119.
I move we approve resolution 1119, a resolution demonstrating commitment to incline management.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? We do have copies of the resolution. I suspect it's in our packet. There probably are some printed copies as well. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Next item, item number 6, ordinance number 0419, an ordinance repealing chapter 5.08 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning medical marijuana centers and repealing and reenacting chapter 5.09 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning retail marijuana stores and marijuana testing facilities. First reading. And here's Ms. Johnson now. Ms. Johnson, would you like to great time? That's okay, don't sit down. Oh, you can sit down and do it from there, that's fine, wherever you'd like to do it.
Can you get one picture here? This photo, one photo here?
Sure. Brief intermission.
Technical difficulties. Okay, folks should be.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Johnson.
Have a good day. Thank you.
The introduction was, actually, you can just go ahead and tell us what you'd like us to know concerning this ordinance.
The ordinance around marijuana already?
We are.
Oh, awesome, okay.
Yeah, I got Bill left to introduce the incline one.
I'm sure you did a great job. I apologize for my tardiness, I thought I had the time all figured accurately.
Perfect timing, we're ahead of schedule.
Cruising along.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, this is, the purpose of this is to hold first reading of ordinance, 0419, amending the medical and retail marijuana regulations. And so, there's a little bit of history here. In March of this year, in conjunction with renewal of an existing retail marijuana license, we discovered that the City of Manitou Springs marijuana regulations for, residency requirements for new owners or any owners were not consistent with state statutes. And so in discussing this issue, the City Council identified, an interest in clarifying the total number of marijuana facility locations in the community, as well as prohibiting standalone medical marijuana centers that are located apart from retail marijuana facilities. And then staff and the city attorney are also recommending combining all of the marijuana regulations into one section of the code and making the regulations more consistent with respect to location, application requirements, security signage, and procedural requirements for both types of establishments. In April of this year, the City Council decided to establish a moratorium on new marijuana license applications to allow consideration of these amendments, and this moratorium is effective until July 31st of this year. So I have provided kind of a summary of the ordinance here in my memo, and I'll try to go through that fairly quickly for members of the public who are here this evening. So as we talked about combining the regulations for medical and retail into one section, updates to address amendments to state regulations, also to allow consumer packaging to have branding such as logo, name of business, address, phone number, provided that marijuana regulations are printed on the outside of the packaging. And in front of you this evening, you do have an example which was provided by Maggie's Farm that they put together. I did not receive a response related to that from Emerald Fields. And then medical marijuana centers and retail marijuana stores may only be operated.
Just for the audience and for those watching, it is or is not legal to consume, some dues about how to ingest this product, and then also about driving, stop drunk driving in Colorado, and actually numbers for a taxi. So just so that you're, it's pretty small print, I know you can't see it, but there's quite a bit of proposed language.
I did pass one around.
Okay, to go on the back of these bags. Thank you.
That medical marijuana centers and retail marijuana stores may only be operated as dual operations, neither may operate as a standalone establishment. And then there was also suggestion of clarification of the intent of allowing these in commercial districts. The discussion by the city council was that their recollection was that it was really intended only to be sort of in the URA commercial area of the community on the east side of 24. And so we have identified those boundaries within the proposed language. No more than 2 medical marijuana centers and 2 retail marijuana stores may be licensed or located within the city at any given time. Separation between medical marijuana center or retail store and another such facility is being increased from 200 feet to 500 feet, and really the purpose of that is so that there's consistency in all of the separations between sensitive uses instead of having different ones that we have to monitor or remember. And we did look, I did provide also a map for you in your packet. We talked about, or not in your packet, at your seat. I don't have an extra one of these, but I can put it here if anybody wants to look at it, but I'll read it back if there's a question. And so what that does is it identifies the sensitive land uses, the location of each facility, and then the 500-foot buffer around each of those existing facilities. The ordinance clarifies that licensees whose permanent annual license has been expired more than 90 days must reapply for a new license, just as if they had never had a license in the past. Marijuana sales are allowed up to 10 p.m. And the ordinance allows for an hourly restriction for retail marijuana testing facilities through the conditional use permit process. In the section 5.09.320 related to administration having the authority to adopt, amend, alter, and repeal administrative rules has been deleted. Then there was a section of the code that had quite a bit of discussion, and it was a concern to both of the current establishments, and that is section 5.09.100, location and application criteria, subsection 1. And basically this section requires review of the appropriateness of the business location every 5 years, and conforming. So they had a real concern about that, and I wasn't real clear on it, and the city attorney wasn't available at the time when we talked about it. And so I had suggested that we could maybe just put may in there, but the whole point of this section is to determine if the physical location is appropriate still after 5 years. And so the city attorney said that putting, and he can certainly weigh in as he's here, that may in there would really render this entire provision vague, and that's not permissible. So this should be discussed by the city council, whether this section should be left in as it is or potentially removed.
I'd be happy to weigh in when we get to it after the summary.
Sure, and then while this is not a zoning code regulation, staff did provide the draft regulations and an update to the planning commission at their May meeting, and there was general support for the ordinance. There was just one comment that requiring a medical marijuana center to be a dual operation with retail could eliminate medical marijuana centers if retail licensees chose not to have a medical license. Now that has been clarified in the way the ordinance is presented for first reading, because you have to be both dual medical and retail, so that would eliminate that issue. So the proposed timeline for moving forward with the process of amending the regulations is that this evening is the first reading of the ordinance, and then on on June 4th, the City Council would schedule a public hearing and second reading for adoption of the regulations. There is also the opportunity to have a work session if that was determined necessary on May 28th, but that was not part of the original schedule, but that was kind of the thought in there that there is that extra meeting in case there is a need for that. We have really received very little additional input other than from those who own establishments. I did receive an inquiry from somebody in the community. I sent them all of the information, the packet, the schedule, all of that, and I never heard anything back. So with that, the ordinance is here for your discussion and review, and I will turn it back to the council.
Great. Any questions? And I think one thing we need to address pretty early on, and could be done in conjunction with the motion, is the provisions in paragraph 5.09.100I, which is the provision that Ms. Johnson was referring to, the appropriate location for medical marijuana center, retail store, or marijuana testing facility shall be determined at the time of the issuance of a first license for such business, and shall be reviewed every 5 years thereafter by applying the same criteria used for the initial application set forth in this section. Failure to meet such criteria shall result in the revocation of the license. Mr. Parker, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I know when this was originally drafted, I remember the city council having a conversation about this provision, because the whole new use, there's a lot of concern. They want to have a chance to come back and look at it again, to see, is this working out like we thought it would? And the Colorado marijuana code allows local governments to be more restrictive than state statute. And so this is definitely more restrictive. My argument is with these uses, they don't have a vested right. You know, any jurisdiction could basically change the law and outlaw the use of these stores at any time. And they're basically operating their business subject to that risk. And so this basically says, you know, you're getting your license, it's a condition of your license. And if the city council looks at this in 5 years and decides that you don't meet the location criteria anymore, your business will basically have to either move or shut down. Now that's a very harsh consequence for business, any business in town, to have that kind of uncertainty for 5 years, but I think it's legal. Whether it's good policy or not is your decision. What I was told by Kim was there was some conversation at the work session where city council had thought, well, we'll basically say that if they don't meet the location criteria, which is in this one section, section 509-100, which is the 500 feet from sensitive uses, and it also requires that it be compatible with the neighborhood as part of a conditional use approval. It doesn't meet those location criteria after 5 years, and it's through no fault of their own, well then they can stay there. But the problem with that is, then there's nothing to look at because they're not going to be moving. The only way they wouldn't meet it is if the business moves to the area or move within that 500-foot restriction, or if you actually wanted to look at the compatibility of the neighborhood requirement, like a conditional use again. My understanding was council was talking about not looking at the conditional use criteria again, and then saying only if it's through their fault is the location criteria not met, then they would basically maybe lose their license. But there's no way that could happen because they're there. And anything that would cause them to not meet that location criteria would be because something moved within the 500-foot radius. Unless you wanted to reopen that whole compatibility with the neighborhood consideration, which is part of the conditional use. So that was my concern. And then the secondary concern was, even if you could do that, even if you did say, if it didn't meet the location criteria, you may lose your license. Well then, the may just leaves it up to city council. Well, okay, you don't meet the location criteria, but you're okay, and then you're not. There's no criteria for when the may is a shall. And under the law, you can't have a land use consideration that just results in just unfettered discretion. So that's why it needs to either be a shall or nothing.
Yes.
Why can't we go in from the other direction and say it's not non-compliant, but sensitive businesses are not allowed to move into this 500 square foot area? That makes more sense to me. You know, because I mean, just down at Emerald Fields, you know, those little houses across the street, somebody could put in a play group there and all of a sudden there goes. That doesn't seem right to me at all. So what you'd be doing is regulating all your land uses based upon where the medical marijuana center is. I've never seen that done. It would be pretty unusual to say that, you know, for like liquor stores and all that. If you move next to a sensitive or a use like that, that's your decision to basically move in there. The real issue is you don't want those coming to already established uses that don't have these impacts on anybody else, like a daycare or whatever else we have in there. So it would be pretty unusual to say those couldn't move within that area. I'm not sure the city would want to do that. But if they moved in that area, then all of a sudden the marijuana operation has to move.
Well, that's why we're considering taking that provision out.
Okay.
That's
So we're
the
gonna
issue.
drop it all, so there'll be no.
That's up
500.
for discussion.
Right.
Not the 500. Just this one provision I that I read, that's the only thing that would
This is
come.
what I'm looking at right here. Yeah.
You might wanna look at the ordinance itself,
It
but
keeps
the
clicking
language
off.
is similar. Okay.
So you look at those criteria for the initial application, and then you're there. Everybody knows where you are. If one of these sensitive uses wants to move nearby, well, that's their choice. They aren't getting surprised.
That's perfect, okay.
That's the way it would work without this provision, I in there. With I in there, the way it's written right now, is in 5 years, you come back and look and say, oh, a sensitive use moved within that 500-foot radius, your business gets shut down.
So I think you're advocating to take the provision out.
I am, but what else do we lose if we do that? I mean, this is a little, you know, we talked about it last week, it didn't make any sense to me last week to allow something to move in like that. So what are we losing? I mean, why is this in here in the first place?
It was in there in the first place because city council was very concerned about how these businesses might actually impact the neighborhood. And they wanted a chance to relook at things in 5 years and see, was this a good decision to allow these or not? And then as part of the original license that was issued, that was the regulation. You knew you were getting a license subject to that review. It was all up front. So city council wanted it in there. But you know, the businesses now are arguing, well, that's a big risk for us to take to keep the business here. We could lose our business in 5 years through no fault of our own. I think it's legal, because city council has a lot of authority to regulate these businesses. But I'm not saying it's good policy or bad policy, that's up to you. I just think if you do it, you need to basically be clear in how you wanna have this read, because what I heard, some of the revisions that were being thought about would basically make it meaningless.
So let me ask you a question, I think following up on, Councilwoman Elder's question is, what other tools do we have if one of these businesses turns out not to be compatible based upon their own operation, whether that's traffic, noise, et cetera, would we have the right under the conditional use permit to revoke the license?
Not the way they're being issued right now. I don't believe you have a condition that would like basically give you a relook in 5 years. This has been an interesting question because city council's asked this question before. You issue a conditional use permit. Typically they're issued based upon the information you have at the time. And you make a decision and then you're done. You don't get to keep on looking at it changing your mind every few years, particularly because conditional use can be for more than just use. It could be for like you build like a school or a structure. And then, you know, in 2 years, you look at it again, you're like, well, we haven't changed our mind. Conditions have changed. People can't have that kind of uncertainty. But the law does seem to allow you to take a relook at a conditional use for certain uses if you put that in the permit and the approval in the first place. And I think we've actually drafted an ordinance for city council's consideration years ago to clarify that, but I'm not sure it got put in your code. So that would be one of the things you could do as part of the conditional use approval, is say, we're gonna look at the compatibility of this business. You have to renew your conditional use every so many years. But that would be essentially what you've got here, if you wanted to keep that in there.
Well, it would be addressing our ability to address problems that are being caused by the business.
Mm-hmm.
What rights do we have to address those problems? Noise, traffic would be the two common ones I could think of.
Well, I mean, right now, but you have your noise regulations that would be just applicable to any business,
Okay.
or anybody in town. Traffic requirements, if they are causing traffic hazards, for example, blocking traffic, you know, not cars not pulling in right or in and out, you probably have a right to deal with that via some sort of, I have to look at your code, but I'm sure there's some provisions in your code that deal with creating traffic hazards.
Nuisance type of thing?
Probably would be under a nuisance provision, I'd have to dig around to see, but businesses can't operate in a way that basically congests city streets. I think we've had this discussion with another business at some point in the past. Yeah, that would probably be one of the ways you could look at that issue. But the overall look at the business with your hard and fast location criteria, you could do that as well, but it would have to be in your code, have to be like this provision, but I'm trying to think what other provisions you have. If there's violations, you have the ability to, you know, revoke the license, suspend the license. You know, it does it that way, and there's criminal consequences if people are breaking the law when they operate their business. So you have a number of those tools. But from a land use perspective, if you've approved it now and you wanna take a look at it again, I think generally your general land use authority is limited, unless you put it in your code.
Other questions from Mr. Parker or Ms. Johnson? Ms. Johnson, do you have a question?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I forgot to enter into the record an email from Councilmember Todd. He had some questions and some comments.
Okay, I'm not sure quite how we're gonna deal with that.
Well, it's legislation, it's fine, it's not like you're doing a quasi-judicial hearing, so you can consider them or not as you want. This is just legislation, so I did sort of peek at this email for 2 minutes when I was in my car on the way over here. And so I think he said that a lot of the comments he had, he thought we could address offline, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of them are super integral to the language or change really any, essential meanings, so I think maybe we could do that offline. I went through them, looked at them, there's a couple that, I think just, he needs some clarification to understand what the situation is. There's a couple of typos, so, I don't think there's anything really substantive here.
So one question that Councilman Todd raised was on marijuana testing facilities, and I heard you mention that, but I didn't, maybe I just missed it in the ordinance. Are we changing the provisions regarding testing facilities? Are we allowing testing facilities under this ordinance or not?
They're allowed.
They're not now.
They were allowed before.
Yep, they've always been allowed.
They've always been allowed.
And I don't think we change anything with respect to them, in this ordinance.
Okay. So, I'm sorry, just, his question, should we allow testing facilities? The answer is we already do.
We do, right.
And if yes, can we resurrect potential safeguards that the prior council was considering? Are those safeguards or those provisions then in the ordinance itself already?
So I don't know what the prior council was considering. I do remember the conversation where there was some conversation whether we should allow them or not. And I think the concept was, well, these aren't selling to the public. These are sort of higher tech type jobs. We'd like to have a business like this in our town. It would be helpful. It's not really the kind of public facing type of entity. It does deal with marijuana and our restrictions with how they operate. But that's all I recall from it. I mean, so the vote was yes, let's have them in, because I think they're a relatively low impact type of business.
That's one round.
I may be wrong in this again, but my recollection of that whole story was that we've already taken up our 4 slots with our 2 businesses of retail and medicinal, and there's no more slots available for any other kind of marijuana business.
No, it was just for the medical and the retail. Those
So
are
they,
testing facilities weren't regulated by number or anything like that. They're treated differently.
well, great, let's get one.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Lanning, unless you have something really, we're gonna have a public hearing on it, we weren't gonna
Okay,
necessarily.
well, pertinent to that question, I think I recall that we limited value-added business operations, not necessarily testing facilities, and that's what, when it happened 6 years ago, I thought that we should add that in, so I don't know if it's in there or not now.
Any other questions or comments concerning the ordinance? I think that it sounds like we're able to address Councilman Todd's questions, at some point. Any other questions concerning the ordinance? If not, we'd entertain a motion. By the way, just so that everyone knows, we did have a pretty extensive conversation about this last week. So we went through it kind of line by line, if you will, proposed some changes. We're here on first reading. Second reading, which is where we'll take public comment, will be on June 4th. I'll have a public hearing at that point.
And my only question would be is if we get some direction on that subsection I of the,
Yes.
that would be helpful.
Right, so if someone wants to address that or not, in a motion, would entertain a motion.
Which number is that?
It is 5.09.100I. Councilman Moore, you gonna take a stab at it?
Yeah. Not, 5 or 6 years later, we're a better understanding of the operation of them than we did when this got passed the first time.
And just as one other note, while we're thinking about the motion, this basically requires that you operate as a dual operation. You cannot be a retail, you cannot be a medical standalone, you have to be both. And so I know that one of our operators, I believe, doesn't have a medical license. So unless you had a time frame for them to get one, they couldn't operate if this passes and goes into effect. So
Isn't that in one of these sections
Right.
where you kinda have to come up with that?
Yep, and so subsection B basically has, I have some blanks in there for a time frame for them to get their licensure, for the license, just as a note.
This is gonna change when the state statute goes into effect, though, regarding what you have to do with your leaf in order to sell.
I don't know, I mean, right now, our requirement is that you have to operate as both.
Right.
So I wanna give them some time to get their medical. I'm not sure what the
Oh, like right now, you have to grow your own to do medical, right?
Right, they're
But that's
changing, yeah.
changing,
Yeah.
but that's not in effect yet.
July first, I believe.
I think, yeah, it's very soon.
So they, even if we gave them a license, they wouldn't be able to do it till July first.
Depends on how they grow.
They didn't say they're not going to.
But see, you can operate as a dual right now. You can be a dual medical retail right
If
now.
they grow their own.
Right.
And one of them, I
One
believe,
does, one doesn't.
Okay. More than I knew. And so you need to think about that. I mean, because if for example, if they don't, I guess if the law changes, then they can get their supply elsewhere. They're okay.
Right.
But until they do, or regardless, they still need to get their license. So we have to give them some time, unless you want them to shut down.
Ms. Johnson?
I was just gonna suggest that we put either 90 or 120 days in here for that requirement, because if the law changes July first, did you think it was? Then, you know, that won't be too far from, this gets adopted on the 4th, and then there's 5 more days for it to become effective, so we'll already be, 9 or 10 days into June. They will have to go through the application process, but my opinion would be, as long as they had submitted an application within that time frame, we would work with them.
Yeah, I mean, I could call their attorney and just say, this is what council's considering doing, what's a reasonable time period for you? He's like, oh my god, we gotta get our supply, we gotta do all that, it's gonna take us 6 months, and we could have that conversation too. I could do that before our next reading.
Alright, so there's two items regarding this motion. One is dealing with the blanks in paragraph B, as to when someone would be required to, have both licenses, and the other is paragraph I. I'm not gonna take any comments at this point unless it's critical to the conversation.
It is critical, and I thought maybe some information would be helpful for you.
Come on.
Okay, thank you.
Real quick, please. Again, this is not arguing one way or the other.
Yes, sir. No, this is not presenting an argument.
Thank you.
So, how these, my name is Eric Lutringer. I live at 4845 Spokane Way in Colorado Springs. Sorry. The way these medical centers work in terms of supplying them currently, before the laws change, is that it's based on patient count. So if they were to get their medical license for the store, let's say they had 0 patients registered with them, they would not have any capacity to fulfill. So until they start signing up patients, then they have to start supplying at least 50% of what their inventory is. So I hope that sheds some light that they can have a license, but if they don't have patients, they're not allowed to have any inventories.
And then starting July first, that 50% changes
To 0. So
0.
you can just wholesale it from any medical cultivation. I just hope that's some good, helpful information for you.
Thank you for your information. Council, what's your pleasure?
I move we approve ordinance number 0419, an ordinance repealing chapter 5.08 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning medical marijuana centers, and repealing and reenacting chapter 5.09 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning retail marijuana stores and marijuana testing facilities, with a change to 5.09.100, paragraph I, and removing that section.
Were you going to comment on section B?
Section B of what?
Section B of the same provision, that's what we were just talking about regarding when they would be required to have both licenses. There's a fill in the blank.
It's on page 11.
And you can just leave it the way it is, and I can provide a suggested date for you.
I think by the time they went through the process, it'd be moved, quite frankly.
I don't know about the moot part.
That's fine, and then as of July 1st, shall have until if you're not operating as a dual operation as of the enactment of this ordinance, whenever that happens to be, because we don't know when it's gonna be yet, that's blank, shall have 90 days.
Okay.
So it's not so much a date as a number of days.
And I'll check in to see if we're missing anything, and we can have a more detailed conversation for the second reading.
So I can help you with that
So-
if you want. So in addition, changing 5.09.100 paragraph B to say that if you're not operating as a dual operation as of the enactment of this ordinance, you shall have 90 days to obtain a license to operate as a dual operation.
So we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? So if I understand the corrections, the motion is to pass the ordinance with the removal of paragraph I of section 5.09.100 and the addition of a 90-day requirement in paragraph B. We have a motion and a second, any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes 5-1. Thank you. Ms. Johnson, thank you for your help. It's been a lot of work to get it to this point. Maybe a little more, but not much, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, let's just make sure we're here. Item 7, we have a new item 7, which is extend a contract to Bob Todd. I was going to ask actually on the old item 7s. We now have a new item 7. I was going to ask that we took item 7 and 8 together. I would ask if the council is amenable to taking the new item 7, the new item 8, and the new item 9 as part of the same conversation. Item 8 became item 9, if I understand correctly, but added an item 7. So item 7 is extending a contract to Bob Todd. Item 8 is consideration of an interim city administrator. Item 9 is discussion regarding selection of the permanent city administrator position. So currently I am calling item 7, asking whether council is amenable to discussing items 7, 8, and 9 together. Somebody? No?
That's in order. See what happens.
Anybody else? Nobody wants to weigh in? All right.
I just take no order.
We'll take item 7, consideration of extending a contract to Robert Todd, and I wasn't sure if you could, the rest of that I had city administrator, I wasn't sure if that was interim or permanent, or either.
It was to extend the contract to Bob Todd to be our city administrator and directing our interim city administrator to negotiate the terms of the contract using our last contract offer as a guide.
Okay. Do you want to have some discussion why this is thrown at us tonight in this manner?
Sure. So last week, I didn't really like the way the discussion was happening. And so I decided that this should be revisited and acted upon with a vote. We really need to put this city administrator search behind us. It's impacting our productivity and what we're able to accomplish on council. Lots of other things aren't getting looked at or getting looked at too quickly. And he is as qualified as our discussion regarding qualifications. He already lives in town, he already knows our issues, he has management experience to handle the situation, and his city knowledge is, well, not as good as a city administrator. For me, is good enough, and I think that by hiring him and putting this behind us, it will move us forward.
Okay. Has anybody talked to Mr. Todd about this? Because he sat here and indicated he was not interested in the position.
I believe his words were he wasn't going to apply for the position. And yes, if he is offered a contract, he will accept, provided the terms are agreeable to him, he'll accept it.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Obviously, council knows my opinion. I'm not I'm all supportive of offering Mr. Todd, this position either as an interim or as permanent. I can go into reasons. I don't think he's qualified. I can go back and look at his tenure. I'm very concerned about his ability to follow council's direction. He has not shown a tendency to always do that in the past. I think it'll be even more difficult for him to do that as city administrator. And that's it for now, but I just think it would be a very, incorrect, way forward for this council.
Hold on one second. I am aghast, absolutely aghast, that after all of the conversation and the process that we've talked about, that this would be sprung upon us without warning, without knowledge, without going through the job description, without going through the profile that we talked about. I find it hard to believe that we would be having this conversation. Mr. Todd were interested in applying, he would apply. He did, he withdrew it. If he wanted to apply again, he could. We had that conversation. Last week we talked about getting a job description, profile, getting people on the list, figuring out a process to deal with them, and here we are. Totally changed. I have no clue where this is coming from. I do agree it is absolutely critical to put this discussion behind us, but I'd like to do it in a way that moves the process forward as we talked about, not to sidetrack, derail the process that we talked about in some other way. And so I think we have a process, we have names, we have people, we can go through the traditional process of interviewing. We haven't interviewed Mr. Todd. We have no idea about how he would treat the conflict between what council wants and what he wants. To approve this, I think, would be terribly, terribly irresponsible, regardless of his qualifications or not. I just don't think it's the right process. So that's what I have to say.
I'd just like to say that I support Bob Todd, and when he was actively pursuing this position, I received an overwhelming amount of emails in his support, and the community saying, yes, we'd like to give Bob a chance for it, I'd like to give Bob an opportunity to do this, so I think for me, it's the right choice.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
As you guys know, 2 weeks ago I made my statement on this, and I pretty much still stand. I think that we pretty much have an individual who really cares. And no, I haven't talked to him since. I haven't had any conversation with him, but that's my personal feeling, as I stated a couple weeks ago. So that's where I stand.
Let me add one other point, in that I would urge council to consider the appearance of a strong conflict of interest. Mr. Todd has participated in this process. He has led in some manner the process of removing or not approving certain people. I think it sends a message to the community that you can participate in that, and then you can benefit from it as well. I don't believe that's the message we want to send to our community in any way, shape, or form. But that's what's happening. And that's what would be happening if we move forward today with this proposal. It sends a message that someone can sit up here, can influence the process, and then they can directly benefit financially from that process. And I don't believe that's right. So, we're not going to entertain any discussion at this point until council is ready to move on this.
Well, it has been 17 months since we started down this road, and we appear to have had 2 official CA searches, which ended with offers being extended to people, and neither of those people chose to accept our offer. And then
No one did accept our offer.
No. We never got a signed offer. So the other thing is that our other processes were never voted on nor followed, and there was no official process for Ed Longfield's interview, and we're not currently in any sort of official search that would make our city attorney very happy. All of our other searches are over, and we have not put any parameters around this new search you say we're having a process around. We haven't defined that yet, so we're outside of any particular process. And after 17 months of searching, we haven't searched, and having a council person being part of that, and his last act was to withdraw so that he wasn't in the way, I think speaks volumes that he didn't do any of this to try to get a financial advantage. And if that is if the end result is that some people in the community think it went down that way, then all I can say is I'm sorry that you think that, but it's not how it happened.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I'm sorry. What didn't happen?
Your assertion about that some people might think that Bob influenced this to get a financial advantage. And I'm saying after all this time and all these official and unofficial processes, and his last act of withdrawing from consideration, to me shows that he wasn't about any of his actions were about financial gain. And that if some people in the community think that that's the case, then I'm sorry they think that, but there's nothing I can do to help them.
But you think the opposite, it's all what people think.
It
So
is
perception is truth. You think one way, you may not be right. Other people think the other way, they might not be right. We don't know what Bob's incentives are or what his reasons for competing for this are. And so either could be right, and I would say the optics are very poor in this case, on a number of levels. I think it's very easy to go out and garner support, and this is what I think, and I could be very wrong, but Bob has gone out and garnered support among his supporters, which is good, but I don't think that the other people have been able to do that, and I think that we have a stable of much better qualified people that we could, Katie Sickles is out there who's looking. She's Colorado, she meets the criteria. Bob does not meet the criteria that I can see that we established last week or the week before or back in March either. So, I think that just to go and hire him without him competing in a process is very inappropriate.
So just to respond to Councilman Rohr, we have items on the discussion regarding the search of an interim. We have item regarding the city administrator. We have two on the list. Mr. Todd is not one of those people. We were going to go through an organized process moving forward. That's what the council decided last week. And now all of a sudden we're gonna change that. Do we even wanna talk about the qualifications? Do we wanna have some discussion with Mr. Todd about how we would address these concerns, these issues? Or do we just wanna blindly go forth and approve this without any consideration of the job description, the other people that we've got on the list? That's how we wanna operate? It's pretty sad. Pretty sad. So, what's your pleasure?
The rules of order allow public comment at some point, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Laddick?
I'll follow this way.
My name is Pat Sitzman. I live at 125 Beckers. And yes, I'm a good friend of Bob Todd's. I'm also absolutely disgusted at the process that has been presented by this county. 17 months. How many processes did we go through? 10, 20? We can't find a candidate who is willing to accept this. To address Nancy's concerns that she would rather have someone who does not understand Manitou, does not live here, but has paper criteria.
No, I'm going to support Bob Todd. I talk to a lot of people in this community, as you all do. The community is fed up with you. Absolutely fed up. Get this done. And get it done as soon as possible. To wait another 17 months, we'll vote all of you out. Absolutely. And we will get people, well, I won't threaten.
Thank you, Mr.
But the election season is coming up.
Thank you. Lonnie, very briefly. Excuse me.
I want to take an alternative view to the qualifications and the caring and the competency of Bob Todd. Yes, it's very unfortunate tonight that you guys have not been engaged in a dialogue or a multi-logue with some of your other community members as well as your own council. We've all worked with Bob for a long time. You and I. I don't always agree with Bob. We have a running joke that he's able to do. I can speak from the public perspective, and I'll do that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
We have an understanding, Bob Todd and myself, and I think many people in this community, that he can hit the ground running. He is an engineer, a civil engineer. He holds a master's in business administration. He is an incredible researcher. He is a supporter of every one of you on this council. And Bob Todd deserves, particularly with his gracious withdrawal on a situation that was precipitated, not in the best interest of this community in terms of qualifications, madam, as city administrator. But yet I would say, yes, he holds every credential and every care for this community to take that job on. And I hope you, this four, will support on this panel tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon. All right, Council, what's your...
I'd like to say something as well. My name's Cynthia Bird, and I've lived here in this community for 17 years. I personally know Bob Todd in 2002 when I met him at the Center for Spiritual Living. And I also echo the sentiment that this is a community. This is not an oligarchy. Bob Todd, I can categorically state, is a community-minded man. He's highly qualified as an MIT graduate, one of the finest universities in the entire world. And I cannot imagine this man who has, I've witnessed his spiritual practice, his authenticity, his commitment, his words speak, his deeds speak louder than his words. His deeds precede him. And I urge all of you to see that you have a viable candidate. And having come in here last week and observed this process, I was quite shocked at what the town of Manitou has become. You represent me. I am your citizen. I've come to speak for Bob Todd on my own accord. He does not know I'm doing this. And I know that he's capable of visioning. He's a committed partner. He's a win-win guy. He's a win-win guy. He's not looking for a win-lose situation. For me, Bob Todd is the spirit of Manitou, and for him, I stand. Thank you.
I just want to.
Yes, Mr. Davis, I guess we're going to go through this.
One comment, and I'll be very quick. As you know, you have a number of citizens, quite a few, that have spent the last 17 months along with you in this process. And Bob may be the best thing that you have, but there is a process. We have not even heard him interview because he bailed on the interview. You all need to follow a process. How are you going to convince the citizens of this community that you've picked the right person after 17 months of pursuing a competitive process if you choose to just pick somebody that way? I totally disagree with that approach.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Anybody else want to comment?
I'd like to comment.
No, ma'am, you had a comment already.
I'd like to comment again, and I'd like to suggest that this process is flawed and that it's inherently biased against him, and that there's a problem with this process. This process needs to be re-examined, and I support re-examining this process. Thank you.
I think we certainly, on our agenda, have a process.
Well, then.
We have, excuse me, we have hired a company to engage us with this process. We have names, 17 or so, on a list we are going to go through today, and consider who we would like to interview or what process we would like to go forth to, in a thoughtful manner, consider each one of those applicants. And so we do have that, and we are about to engage upon that until this was seemingly changed tonight. So we'll see if it is or isn't. But,
I do something, if I could, and that is a number of people have come to me, both, I received a number of phone calls and emails from people, who are certainly supportive of Bob. And I've also received, feedback from people who are not supportive in the community. So I don't want it to just think, the community to just think that it's, or this galley, to think that just everybody is supportive of Mr. Todd being on, our city administrator. I personally think that he performs an incredibly valuable service on council. I think that is a different skill set than the city administrator position. And, so I wanna throw that into the mix too. It's just, because we've got some very vocal people here tonight, and I'm sure that next week, you know, we could garner many more very vocal people here on it. So I also am concerned that, the process is, really off the rails at this point. We could debate about the process to this point, but if we go forward with this, I said the process is really off the rails.
so one way to maybe get this back is to suggest that we come up tonight with a list of 3 candidates we want to interview, Todd being one of them. We identify several others from the list that we have in front of us. We schedule interviews for next week, and we make a decision. That gives us some comparison, it gives us a time frame, it gives us, you know, we can look at our job description and see how each of those people fit against the job description, and we have that process. That would be my suggestion if the council is determined to move forward and move forward quickly, which I agree with, that's what I would like to propose. Let's come up with, and which is why I wanted to take those other 2 items. Let's look at the list we have, come up with 3 names of people that we want to interview, let's schedule those interviews immediately, and move forward and make a decision.
May I ask a point of clarification, please? The process that you're proposing is different than the processes that you've done in the past. Is that correct? Through this whole search thing?
Not, somewhat, yes. The first 2 processes, we had elaborate, teams of interviewers and so forth and so on. This last process, we did not have that. We just selected, a group of finalists and interviewed that group of finalists. And this would be a similar process to that. Select a group of finalists, interview those finalists, and make a decision. I think, Mr. Laddie, we're not gonna debate that anymore. Thank you. All right, council, what's your pleasure?
I move that city council extend a contract to Bob Todd to be our city administrator and direct our interim city administrator to negotiate the terms of the contract using our last contract offer as a guide.
It's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
It's a motion, a second, any further discussion? If not, please vote. Motion passes 4 to 2. Is there any item, we'll call item 7 or 8, is there any reason to have item 7 or 8? And I apologize to you all for sitting through this. Anybody wanna have any discussion concerning item 7 and item 8? The items are the, city administrator position and the interim city administrator position. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 9. Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Probably, but I don't know which one is
Where's that? Where we walked dog? Oh. I took mine to the dog park. I'm good. I read your, yeah, that's me. I think that's the. Yeah, I saw him come in. I know why. Well, it looks like the beginning of time, I just got to get on top and, I part of the city attorney, I know, I had no idea. I've got all kinds of things to do. They hire them. Right now, my schedule. I know, it's hard. No, I mean, no, I don't know. I mean,
This is the one that used to be sold for negotiation, like it's down below.
But there's also. So the good thing is, you may be able to leave. Maybe, but we'll have to figure out all the logistics of when you have to. Just let somebody that way. You have to. Until when you identify your finalist. Well, yeah, he's got to advise that, and probably in session, in legal session, executive session in front of his. I just came from Austin, and I was instead of I was like, oh, so you can get out of here, so that looks like we're going to. Okay, yeah, if we get out of here by 10 o'clock, I'll come. Some people that were probably before your time, former head of water, the guy who hired me actually, the gas, George Lee, Wayne Booker, and former city attorney, Carla Hartzell, Steve David, they both have head personnel. It is. I think there's about 20 of us, and at any given time, there's usually between 10 and 15 that come. And of course, because it's every other Wednesday morning, and you have to I missed like the last couple of days, because I just, it seems like they're on till midnight. It's like, they meet at 6. So, they're always talking to you, meet at 6. Like, you got
I mean, I'm a morning person, but that's like really.
I'll next week.
Oh, I didn't get my office? You already are. Yeah.
Also, and then at some point, we're going to talk about
That's what we do.
advertising.
It's legal and there's not political, right?
I know you have to before you.
Oh, that's right, that's true.
Well, I think, let me ask you, but it seems like he should give you all some advice since it's fast about exactly how we gotta go through this process. So, let me check. Are you gonna address that in terms of advice about timing and all that kind of stuff? Okay. I know, but it seems like it's an appropriate. Okay, it seems like
I need you. And who's participated in more than Really?
Friday morning for cause.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I got family members.
Oh, yeah.
And right now, so
I know. Sorry, I just thought of it.
Do whatever.
Where they go together?
We used to do a lot of races, we did. Well, I did. I finished without the bus, without the bus picking me up, so that was, that was my goal. So.
So you're working with the,
Indirect, up in Denver, Chicago, also.
so you know, how close to the stadium, water and sewer down there?
yes, with a big, stands.
Maybe it's
So how far you guys think you can take over the buildings behind that, and then with like an electrical building?
No, it's gonna stay in that footprint by the warehouse, vacate Moreno, and push into Moreno. People didn't realize that we do that space, so push into Moreno. And then the first residential community, group of apartments, will go on the other side of Moreno, and that's connected to the and then eventually, out of the way, it's not water, but pretty much.
yeah, I was really
Because when I was in City of Colorado Springs, I was in the city, and so now it's turning to like, there is part of the plan, there was a pedestrian bridge, but not for several years. For the next couple of years, Jenkins and Norwood always like dinner with the process Carcon. That not long-term solution, it's a short-term solution, so we're completing that.
So who's actually paying for the
Stadium is the state, with regional tourism act funds and, ours.
50% off on the Saturday.
It's like the rest of the time.
I know. I mean, I just, I
Yes, yes. Okay, we're gonna call item 9, discussion regarding establishment of a parking enterprise fund. What I'd like to do maybe, Mr. Parker, is you could just give us a little bit of information. This item, I had asked that we have this item on the agenda to follow up our discussions about the potential coordination of efforts with Metroport, Metropolitan District, and one proposal that we have discussed but not really gone very far with is the possibility of proposing to the Metro District that we lease the lots, and then the funds from that enterprise, or those 2 lots, the Michigan and the Wichita lot, we put into an enterprise fund potentially. That enterprise fund would be for purposes as defined in the initial documents. Generally would be transportation, mobility, other issues, and we can get into more detail about how that enterprise fund would be structured. But I think it would be important for us to figure out, is that even feasible? How might that look? And then, of course, we would take that discussion to the Metro District and say, okay, here's what we know about an enterprise fund. Let's have a conversation about whether that works or doesn't work for the members of the Metro District.
Right, well, I don't have a lot of detailed information, but, you know, enterprise funds are funds that are created that are, basically exempt from the TABOR requirements. So enterprise funds are sort of a separate city business component where, and they're basically required to be, run by revenue from fees they generate. And so, cities and municipalities set up enterprise funds to run, various sort of units of the government as almost like a business, but not entirely. It's more of a financial tool, but you'll have like airport enterprise funds, you'll have, stormwater enterprise funds, and you can have water and sewer enterprise funds. And what you'll do, and what that means is that, the revenue from the enterprise fund comes into from enterprise comes into that enterprise fund, and then that revenue can be used to conduct activities. They can issue bonds without going to a vote of the citizens under TABOR, and the revenue to the enterprise fund doesn't count as revenue to the city. And TABOR is a taxpayer bill of rights which has certain limits on multi-fiscal year obligations, how much revenue you can increase by from year to year. There's limitations on that for municipalities that don't apply to the enterprise itself. So it gives you more flexibility in dealing with revenue and operating the business. And it also insulates the city from the operations of the enterprise and TABOR limitations that might apply. One key aspect of enterprise fund or enterprise under TABOR is that you need to make sure that no more than 10% of its revenue come from grants, state grants, in any year, or you'll lose the enterprise status, and then that all the revenue from the enterprise will then be attributed to municipality, which can cause issues for the municipality with the TABOR revenue limits. And so what you want to do when you're operating an enterprise fund is have the thought that, okay, this is going to be a long-term entity in most cases. We're going to basically operate it, we're going to keep the revenue in there, it's going to be self-sustaining generally. And when you talk about state grants, that would include money coming from the municipality, the city, to the enterprise. So if you're giving general fund revenue to the enterprise, that counts to that 10% limit. But setting up enterprise is not that difficult, it's basically an ordinance establishing it, and then it's basically accounting from there on to make sure that you're tracking the revenue, keeping it in the enterprise. And then you can basically do, deals, IGAs with other entities with the city acting by and through its enterprise, so it insulates the revenue from the city revenue. Sorry, that's maybe a little more complicated than you were asking for, but it's really a financial vehicle to give the city some financial benefits, to operate a separate entity free from Tabor restrictions.
And we could set up the parameters of the use of those funds as we see fit.
They have to be for enterprise purposes.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we were to set up a transportation mobility fund and we were to include language that it would be limited to, and I'm reading from the Metro District Service Plan in 1989, could we include language that would say that the purpose of this fund is to alleviate the shortage of parking, traffic congestion, alternatives for park and recreation areas, to enhance downtown ambiance, pedestrian experience, and scenic walkways?
Yep.
That type of language would be appropriate.
Yep.
And would put some parameters around how that money could be used.
Yep.
I'm sorry, where did you get that language from?
The Metro District Service Plan, adopted in 1989. It is not in your packet. It is on it's on the city website, I think is where I found it. Your website, maybe?
It's on the city website.
It's on the city website, yeah.
Thank you.
So, questions?
I have a question.
Let's take the council questions. Councilman Moore?
What's revenue? What's considered revenue?
Basically any income to the enterprise. So typically enterprises get revenue from their fees. Right.
Right. So Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority,
Okay.
they subsidize the bus, and this enterprise subsidizes the bus. Is that just a kind of a wash, or how would something
I
like
guess
that
it depends
work?
upon, is the bus operated, owned by the Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority or the
No.
city? So,
By Mountain Metro.
yeah, so, they can use their funds, their revenue for enterprise purposes, so that could be an enterprise purpose. If Pikes Peak Rural Transportation Authority is actually an enterprise, it may just be a separate governmental entity.
Tax,
It isn't an enterprise.
it's not enterprise, no, it's just
It's an
a
authority.
taxing authority.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the enterprise analysis wouldn't apply in that case. Well, enterprises can use their revenue for enterprise purposes, but if money comes in from state grants or from the city's general fund, that counts towards the enterprise revenue. If it's a grant, so loans are okay, but if it's a grant,
It's not a grant, it's not a loan, it's just different tax revenue.
so it
That
doesn't,
the city would apply
it's fine.
perhaps, I don't know, it's kinda weird. I guess it depends how we, I guess it really depends how we structure the enterprise.
So if you have your own enterprise that's for transportation purposes, whatever you wanna, how do you wanna define that? And then that enterprise is gonna have to charge fees. Or
Can an enterprise share things?
like, that's a broad statement, like in what way?
Sure. So the enterprise doesn't own the bus system. The enterprise contracts with the bus system.
That's fine.
Can the city share the cost of the bus system with the enterprise?
Very likely, yes.
Okay.
I think what I'm hearing is, could the money from that enterprise fund be used to fund the shuttle system? Is that the
Yeah,
question?
because, I mean, what's the revenue? It was like $1 million for our transportation system?
Parking revenue?
Yeah, parking revenue.
It's a good year, a little over $1 million.
And so, you know, what are you gonna spend that money on, right? And one of the biggest expenses you would put against is the bus system, which is pretty expensive.
So, Councilman Ward, my thought, and I propose this, is that we only do this if we can come to some arrangement with the Metro District. That this would be a way of ensuring that the funds from those two parking lots are used for very specific purposes that were spelled out to meet the needs of the Metro District and their members. I wasn't proposing that we put all of the parking fund, our parking revenue, into this enterprise fund. That wouldn't be my intention to do that.
And you may not.
Good,
you may
that
not
is
even-
another option, of course.
So you're saying that Metro District might only let us lease the lots if that revenue went into
Well, I'm saying that is
enterprise.
a proposal, as opposed to, I didn't think that there was gonna be much, interest in just leasing the lots and then the city doing with whatever with we want with the money. I didn't think that was gonna get very far. But if we were to agree with the Metro District as to exactly what that money would be used, in broad context, not line item, what that money would be used for, it might be more of an attractive proposal. The gentlemen that are involved with the Metro District are here, but it wasn't my intention to debate whether it was or was not. Tonight it was to find out the mechanism so that we could come to you and say, hey, here's what we think if that's what council wants to do. That's the intention.
Would you like me to come to the podium?
If you'd like to weigh in, and again, not whether it's such a good idea that the Metro District would or would not, although you're welcome to weigh in on it. We're trying to figure out if an enterprise fund is one tool that we can take to have a conversation with. Mr. Hodges?
Randy Hodges, 142 Clarksley Road. Good evening, everybody. This is an interesting proposition you've got out there, Mayor. But, the last time you kind of floated out one of these propositions, it was for this lease agreement. And at first we said, no way would we want to lease the parking lots to the city and give up that revenue stream. And, but we agreed to hear your proposal. We said, well, maybe they've come up with a different wrinkle or something and a different way to look at this. And, well, you hadn't. You said, what would the Metro District have to come up with so that it would come into an agreement with the city to lease the lots to you? And so our board couldn't think of a way that was beneficial to the Metro District to lease the lots to the city, to lose that revenue stream. For one thing, now that we've got, and by the request of the city, we put our parking structure plan on hold pending the mobility study, the results of the mobility study. So we've got a more pressing issue now when we were going full forward with parking structure. The failing bridge was going to be addressed with that. That was going to be part of the plan of the parking structure to replace the bridge. The bridge is in serious need of repair or replacement, and that's a high dollar ticket. Perhaps we would be interested in entering into an enterprise agreement if the replacement of the bridge was one of the first projects that we tackled. We can't even get any bids from contractors to repair or replace that bridge because there's no documentation on how it was built. Nobody knows what's sitting there.
Wow.
They want us to spend a lot of money to come up with surveys, do the ground x-ray and all of that stuff to tell them what kind of bridge is there before they'll even anticipate any repairs. So we've got that going on. We can't sign off our revenue stream to an enterprise fund when we've got that kind of a burden that we're looking at. That's our main focus right now, frankly, with the project on hold, with the structure project.
And as I had envisioned, the language that we would craft together would certainly cover that. If you're going to use that operation or use that as a parking, you have to provide access. And if your bridge is failing, then you got to deal with it. And if that's a number one priority, that's very well made.
And there's all kinds of ideas being thrown out there for that property, deck it or turn it into European whatever, but regardless, the bridge has to be taken care of. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that revenue probably needs to be directed towards that. So with that in mind, the Metro District is not looking at this enterprise agreement. in much favor unless we would share sources, share revenue to fix the bridge.
Well, actually, I think what would happen is if we had a lease for that space, for that parking, and we agreed as to the terms of that lease, then the city would have the obligation to fix that, because we would presumably take over operation of that, which would include the lease, which would include the bridge. So potentially that's something that.
So that leads me to the next question. Pending the mobility study, and what it recommends as far as parking structures and everything, we put our project on hold to deck the Wichita lot at your request, like I say, pending the outcome of the mobility study. So, we're also kind of reluctant to enter into any kind of an agreement prior to the outcome of the mobility study. Is the mobility study gonna recommend that an enterprise system be created? You know, I don't know if that was even on their radar till you presented that to them. I kind of feel like you're trying to guide the study, Mayor.
I didn't recommend that or present that in any way, shape, or form, Mr. Hodges, as part of the mobility study. I've talked to you about that, and I've talked to the council about that, but I have not talked to the mobility study folks about that.
The email I got from Laura Newman this morning states that you had talked about an enterprise system. That you were having conversation with people.
I have had lots of conversations with people. I have not, and I don't believe that's part of the mobility study. Ms. Newman, who's sitting behind me, can correct me, but I don't believe that's part of the
And
enterprise.
she can correct me on that email that went out this morning and the dialogue that we had. But
It is not my intention to, my intention is to have a conversation, Mr. Hodges, about how we can work together better. And I've encouraged that to happen for the past many, many months. I would still encourage that to happen if this is one way to make that happen, to sit down and talk about how those monies might be put into an enterprise fund, how those monies might be used. That's the intention, Mr. Hodges. Nothing more, nothing less.
Well,
If the Metro District says, we're not interested in talking, we don't want any part of you, then potentially we'll go to the members of the Metro District if the council would like to do that and ask them directly how they would like the board to operate. But that's a different conversation. Right now, the conversation is what can we do together to make something happen? That's all.
to make something happen, and from our point of view, you're continually trying to get control of our revenue stream and do with it as you feel like it should be done, and not the Metro District, the businesses which the Metro Board represents.
And the language I read was exactly from your service plan documents.
I saw that.
That's my intention, no more, no less.
Where do you go from here? You
Thank
know,
you, Mr. Hodges.
I never hear any of the council members weigh in on your.
Well, I think we'll hopefully get that happening right now.
Okay,
Hopefully. so.
thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm all for continuing to work on some kind of partnership with Metro and the city. But regardless of that, the idea for a parking enterprise stems back to when we first started the paid parking plan, and there were two sides of the issue. One was that it would all go into the general fund, and some people wanted an enterprise fund for it. And that's water under the bridge, it all went into the general fund. But for years, the Transportation and Parking Board has been asking for an enterprise fund, even if we were to start small. Because otherwise, they have absolutely no discretionary, not one bit of money that they can, on the fly, react to a problem that could be solved with a little bit of extra funding that they didn't have to go through budgeting and wait another year to get, and then be denied. Because I've been on that board and come to budget meetings where we've made a list of things that would make our parking management better. And I'm not talking, I mean, like the biggest we've ever asked for is about $150,000 when I was on that board. And pretty much every time we're turned down. We're talking about small tools like, technology, just little things that could make a big difference in what's happening downtown. And it could be big things too, like technology that helps people locate spaces. But regardless of whether or not we can come to some agreement with Metro, this enterprise fund is still a good idea. This is our 6th year of managed parking. we've learned a lot of things. There's some things that have been talked about at every single parking and transportation board about little things that could be done. And I think that even if we started small in this enterprise zone and then it got bigger and Metro decided there was some synergy and some things that could happen down the road, I'm assuming it could be grown. But I don't want this to come to a screeching halt because we're not able to strike a deal with Metro tonight. I think there's a reason that this could be helpful for our community. And I can tell you that back in the day, I wanted it all to go into an enterprise fund, but after the flooding and we had that extra revenue in our general fund, it really helped us get extra money for flood recovery. So I've seen all sides of it now. So I wouldn't advocate for all of it at this point to go into a parking enterprise. Maybe someday we'll get to that point where we can. But regardless of what happens between Metro, I think a parking enterprise fund is a good idea. And Bill Kerner's not here tonight, but I feel confident that if he were here, he would be giving you that message.
Let me just clarify something Councilwoman Holbrook raised. So if we have an enterprise fund that's a fund of the city would still designate and create a budget for that fund, as we do for the water fund, sewer fund, and so forth.
That's right.
So it wouldn't be, and the council, I guess, could delegate some of that authority to an advisory board, such as the Transportation Parking Board, but ultimately the council would make those decisions.
Ultimately, it would come to you. You have to approve the budget. So.
I wanted to clarify that.
Thanks for clarifying that. And I think that you could even ask perhaps the Transportation and Parking Board to give you some budget suggestions.
Absolutely.
And, but the problem that we've had in the past is, and it's just the way it always rolls, when they came and asked for money, it's hard to compete with flood mitigation. And I understand that. That's just what happens. And if all the money's in one pot, then it doesn't get there.
Okay. Other comments from council to this issue?
Well, I think that, an enterprise fund is the way to go because we as council sometimes look at, it kind of puts the fundings in areas where they're more dedicated for, and we know that, instead of just a pool of money out there that if we need it, we just use it for whatever. So I think that's a great thing. I still see that we've got probably, I don't see that we need to have some more discussion, and I think it needs to maybe be with all of council, with the Metro, so each of us understand each other and move forward at that point. Because I'm kind of hearing two sides, and I don't think we're at that point yet to move forward with Metro District. And I don't think they're ready to move forward with us at that point, so.
I still have a question. It might just be right off left field, but I'm sure out of 15 Crystal Park Road, I also own Mediterranean Suites. Regarding the funds, who controls the funds for like crosswalks and stoplights for children crossing these busy roads as the more you guys put more transportation in? And have all these bus ideas and parking ideas to bring more people in Manitou, which is already crowded as it is. What fund takes care of that?
So typically that would be a number of different funds. If it's along the state highway, which is our Manitou Avenue, it could be CDOT funds. If it was just a city
But
project.
what about Crystal Park Road?
Crystal Park Road would be a city funded project.
And that would be funded through the city council?
Potentially so. I know Crystal Park Road has also applied for some money through the long range transportation plan. They've applied for some money through that. So there are a variety of sources that can be used for
different sources.
Crystal
And
Park
that
Road.
city council would approve those funds for, like, example, if people were speeding 60 miles an hour where there's a crosswalk where children cross every day.
Let's not get into the details.
Well, no,
of
what I'm
Crystal
saying
Park
is, I
Road,
meant
but-
like, if, for an example, I'm just giving an example, so if there was a spot that was dangerous to children, you would come to the city council to get that funding?
Yes. So if you have questions about the Crystal Park Road, there's a whole group studying Crystal Park
Yes,
Road
I know there
safety
is.
issues.
I don't know anything about them, I was just
I'd be
asking.
glad to
if
put
we're
you in
talking about
touch because
transportation.
they are looking
Thank
at those
you.
very issues.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Laddie?
Dale Laddie, 511 High Street. I've attended several of these Metro District Board meetings over the last 4 months, maybe 6 months, probably 4 out of 6 months. And the first thing that comes to mind with me, if I was in their position and discussing it with you, which they haven't done, is that you know, you're apparently interested in creating an enterprise account with their money to use in your account, and that, you know, is on the heels of some rhetoric not too many months ago that some people wanted to see that Metro District Board dissolved altogether. So there's been a lack of truth, and I understand the legal constraints, you know, it's rarely in a scenario like here tonight where you guys are here and the council's here where you can communicate, where people can communicate on what they've seen. But there's some issues that are still, you know, Bill doesn't need to be here, Kerner, to talk about the issues that he's observed, but one of the things is the need to improve off-site so much. Lovers, you know, anything that is built there in terms of what they might use the funds for as it's currently constructed or stipulated would be either a parking facility or the creek walk. They're chartered for that purpose. But, you know, you throw them off when you tell them you're interested in leasing the lots, but you never give them an offer. This council never gives that board an offer. And then it morphs into an enterprise account, which I had proposed to this council some time ago, that would make real new income revenue for you, this town, without impacting on theirs. But you failed on that. So I think that you need to get together with what the board wants to see to support their 161 members, as you said. And I hope that that'll happen in the next administration.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lang. Council, what's your pleasure? Is there any other questions for Mr. Parker? How would you like to move this conversation forward? Or not?
I can support an enterprise fund. I'm not in support of anything with Metro. I don't understand the point. I don't know what the problem is that we're trying to solve with doing anything with the Metro lots. But enterprise fund might be time to explore that a little bit more than we have in the past.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to weigh in on it?
I would be in support of an enterprise fund, and also I think if anything, as I stated before, I think if we want to have further conversations with Metro to see how that may benefit both entities. I think that's something down the road, but right now I'd support an enterprise fund.
I would be interested in further exploration of the enterprise fund for transportation, but I also would very much like to continue discussions with Metro District. I think that we can do more together than we can do separately.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd like to move forward with the plan as well. And I don't know, I guess I might have, I'm not sure where the Metro Board is and what their thoughts are on things. So I would rather, like Susan said, not be put off by that. And like Gary says, let's continue that, and Nancy, let's continue that dialogue if we can. And maybe in the future it will be one enterprise fund for us and for the Metro. But I definitely think we need it. We need it for the parking board. They need it.
What? It's not for the parking board.
It's for them to use, like Susan
No,
was saying.
it's not.
As long as it's connected to parking, is my understanding. If it's an enterprise fund. Why do I always get this stuff wrong, Jeff? I mean, can I just
They're trying to clarify that, but go ahead, say what you think, and then.
Well, I mean, the funds that you come from the enterprise fund have to be reinvested into that entity, which would be parking.
Right, but it wouldn't be controlled by the Transportation and Parking Board.
Just like OSAC,
Not
OSAC has
controlled,
the
but it
tax.
might be available to
It
them.
wouldn't be available to them, it would be available to City Council with their recommendations,
I would like
propose
to-
a budget and so
I
forth.
would like to see the city council recommend that the money goes to the parking board, so that because that's their issue, they study it. To me, as a person who lives here, parking is one of our biggest issues. It's one of the biggest complaints, it's one of the biggest burr in everybody's saddle. You can't go to breakfast without having to dicker with those little droids, and it's like, you know, I mean, to me, it's been a huge turning point for the town. So
So I mean, it caused the confusion and I apologize for that. I know. Accept responsibility for that. So, if the enterprise fund were to be created, city council would still control through the budgeting process how that money was spent. Parking, transportation planning is an advisory board, so they can say, here's how we'd like to see you spend it, but you'd have to make parking a board or commission. That would have to change over, and there's been some discussion about that, so that they could actually have that kind of authority, is my understanding.
I've heard that too, and I like that too.
Right.
Can I say something? OSAC and PARAB are currently, I believe, the only two boards or commissions that have funds specified for parks and open space. Neither of those committees have control or authority over the funds. They prepare a budget that they submit into the regular budget process, and council approves or does not that budget. But none of the boards or commissions have authority over, have spending authority over anything.
So they would,
Right,
the
but I've been on
transportation,
both those boards, and at least they know that they have access or potential access to some funds. And I think the parking board needs that.
right, so they would present a budget.
Yeah,
and what
fine,
the money
however
that-
you wanna say it.
Yeah,
But I think, I would not go into an enterprise fund and go, hey, we're gonna give this to, economic development in the chamber. Cause they're really very part of the same problem. So that's all I'm saying. I'm in favor of an enterprise fund, whether or not it includes Metro. And I think since we are talking about what it's going to look like in the details, that we might consider in those details that the funds be, or at least a portion of them, dedicated to improving conditions, maybe improving the air quality, maybe even getting out of town parking for people. Who knows what the future will bring?
that's exactly what we would do in the enterprise fund.
Very good, I'm all for it.
Perfect. All right. So what I'm hearing is perhaps we want to see a draft of an ordinance and a process of how we would implement that ordinance. Sure. It sounds like maybe the next step.
Okay.
Anything else on that item? We'll call item 10, discussion regarding key performance indicators. I meant to say this, but we've been doing so well, I don't think I need to, but we have 30 minutes on this item.
Okay, let me finish this thought, hold on just a minute.
All right.
I'm making a list of our commitments.
Great.
There you go.
Okay, so let's talk KPIs, otherwise known as key performance indicators. Are you driving, Nancy?
Sure.
Okay. So we've had quite a bit of discussion, over the last, probably month or so about the notion of, key performance indicators as a method for us to, continuously improve performance in the city. And the purpose really tonight, I'm gonna present a number of different items and potential measures and all kinds of things, but it's really, to get guidance from you all about how we might want to use KPIs to help demonstrate how well we're doing. And let me preface this at the beginning. I think we mentioned last time when we were talking about KPIs, Nancy and I had been working on a customer service kind of overarching goal around, better customer service or improving customer service. And the reason we chose that particular item was because that seems to be an item that would be covered by all departments, not just whereas there's potentially other areas that we would want to focus on as a city that might be concentrated in one or two departments. The other thing that you're going to see through this process, mostly with the attachments, is that I've also asked our department heads to look within their own departments and look at KPIs that maybe other cities are using. They've looked at a number of different references, things that would be valuable to them just about running their department, just about being able to evaluate how well their department is doing. So they're kind of parallel paths. So as we go through this, just understand both those things are going. And so when you see some KPIs that don't look like they're customer service, it's because we're also looking along this other line. So go ahead.
Okay, so basically around a KPI, you're really trying to look at objectives that are gonna evaluate your performance. And we use those, we use them for a couple of reasons. One is we use them to evaluate our success if we have particular targets. For example, in the police department, it might be about response time. Also in the fire department, within our water area, it might be about how many leaks we have on our system, you know, those kinds of things. It can also be used, and ideally, you would want to translate what might be an organizational KPI down into an individual department or even individual person, in terms of how they contribute toward overall achieving those objectives. So really, before you can really do a good job of identifying KPIs that really meet all those things, there's lots of things you can measure. But you want to make sure that you're measuring something that actually is going to help move you in a direction towards success. And the other real key is that you also want to have balanced KPIs, and I'll give you an example. In most organizations, you would expect, you know, any kind of service organization, you would expect some component around customer service. But at the same time, you also want some kind of financial management, because it can't be just customer service is great, but we always overspend our budget. It's gotta be balanced. And so, ultimately, and then you tie that back to your overall goals of the organization. So go ahead. So we talked about the roles of council, obviously setting vision for the city. I've talked a little bit about strategic planning, et cetera. I think we could, I haven't looked at it in any great detail because I guess the idea just came up today, but taking a look at whether or not Plan Manitou actually fits the notion of setting that vision and that strategy for us overall, because frankly, I think it would be in our best interest to only have one document as opposed to several that are floating around vision and direction. Also, you know, council's role is around setting policy, and then that gets implemented through rules and ordinances, et cetera. And then, of course, you all have control over budget, so you decide, you know, how things are resourced, what kinds of resources are available, and finally, the accountability. And providing the oversight and accountability. And so one of the things you might want to look at for council is how you might improve that role and whether there's KPIs associated with how you would want to provide better oversight or, you know, more full oversight or something along those lines. And I think the truth is, as I mentioned earlier, is, you know, the things that we measure and report on are the things that we focus on. And we have to make sure that when we actually roll out a full program, that it is balanced. If we don't have any if we don't identify priorities, then we really don't have any priorities, and people at all levels in the organization are just guessing at what's important for us to achieve those goals. So go ahead. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. You know, there's a couple of different things you can do. You can measure points in time as well as trends over time. Sometimes trending is important. For example, you know, an HR measure might be about turnover rates. Well, turnover rates are telling you about how much time you're probably spending, you know, bringing new employees up to speed. Generally, you're not going to be as efficient or effective as an organization if you have a high turnover rate. And so you use that basically as an indicator of something that you need to work on, but you don't necessarily have a target. It's more of a trending kind of piece. You obviously, one of the things that we tried to do through this process is we actually pulled out, ICMA has a number of measures that are used across their organizations that are especially valuable because they provide benchmarking information, so that if we are gathering this information, we can not only compare our own performance over time, we also can compare ourselves to other cities, and I'm sure we can narrow it down if there's a size issue, et cetera. But you do want to avoid accumulating and reviewing data, that becomes a job in and of itself. So one of the things that I also did is I had people provide information to me about the things that they're already tracking and try to figure out how we might be able to use that. So you don't really want to, you don't want to identify something that you're going to track if you don't have a clearly defined reason for doing it. You know, we're not just going to keep doing it because we've always done it that way. At least that's my goal. Over time, you want to test and measure, make sure that what you're measuring is actually giving you the information that says we're moving in the right direction for the outcomes that we want. And we're also want to use this for continuous improvement. I don't think the goal is to put it in, you know, to put targets in there because they ought to be a stretch. I mean, you know, you don't necessarily, sometimes, you know, the measure is you have to do something at 100%. You probably saw those in some of the attachments. It's hard to do better than 100%. But you really want that to be about ways that you can continue to improve as opposed to ways to ding people. Because then you start playing with numbers, and that's not a good idea. We want to make sure that it's useful, and it's actually going to take some time because we really want to link it from a vision through a strategy, through goals and objectives. We're doing a little bit of the kind of up process as opposed to the down process, but I think we're trying to use this as a time to model. Nancy, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just, a couple of things. One is that we've kind of backed into things as opposed to starting with our vision, mission, and goals. We've backed into it by looking at what we measured and what we know about priorities.
Right.
So that's how we latched on to the customer service one. It's a department objective. So what we've not done is go to that next level of what are the city's goals and objectives, and how do we acquire and use the data and targets to be meaningful for us to guide, you know, we're all familiar with dashboards, but to drive resourcing, policy, et cetera, to do the right thing for the city. So,
right. Okay. Go ahead. So we've talked about customer service, and again, you know, I mean, who can argue with a goal to provide our customers the excellent service they deserve? I think that's, but what are some of the components of that? And these are just some examples. Wait, did I miss something? Oh yeah. So a strategic objective around improving customer service is looking for customer feedback. And you could have a target, there's just an example here, but increasing feedback to the city by 50%. And then there's all these different places where feedback can come in, and actually there's a number of departments that are starting to track that, how many inquiries they get and what kind of inquiries they get, et cetera. Some of them are already doing it and some of them are thinking about doing it. And then obviously then you look at, you're trying to decrease, you know, the percentage of negative comments and hopefully increase your positive reviews, which is a fairly significant leap because generally people are more motivated to write and call you when they're upset than necessarily when they're happy. That's just kind of a natural human thing. And so you have to kind of moderate exactly how you'd set those targets. But that's just an example of how you'd move from a strategic objective to a KPI and then how you get to a target. This is not meant to be the customer service KPI. And they just gave some other examples, we just gave some other examples. You could do the same around contract management, around council performance, and, you know, name something else that, you know, that you might be interested in. Go ahead. So I said, you know, here's the goal. And so what are some of the components of customer service, of excellent customer service? Well, obviously accuracy, timeliness, consideration, you know, only having to go one place and get things taken care of, resolved at the lowest level, not having to escalate everything. Again, that kind of gets down to that first time resolution. Treating people fairly. And then finally, you know, again, getting back to that turnover measure that I mentioned earlier, new employees are in training mode and sometimes that becomes a little more difficult because they're trying to learn at the same time they're trying to provide that service to a customer. And so these are some of the examples. Postcards, I know in my previous life, anytime that construction crews actually performed construction projects, not just repairs, but actual projects, cards were handed out to customers to provide feedback about how well, everything from how well they executed it to how well they cleaned up after themselves to how well they communicated with and that was used actually in individual performance plans. Obviously tracking any kind of media, letters to the editor, etc., that track customer service issues. It could be emails and phone calls to council and staff, and like I said, we're already tracking some of that. We do have a place on the website now to track, to gather comments, and then, well, on any social media. So it could be on our website, it could be on Facebook, Nextdoor, or other places. And of course, realizing that that's gonna require, we have somebody looking at that now, but it would also require that we actually identify them, track them, because you also wanna have your backup when you're explaining exactly however we report it on a monthly basis, on a bi-monthly basis, exactly how many you got, examples of what they were, and somebody's gonna have to measure all that and put them in categories based upon, what we're actually trying to measure. Now, one of the ideas, and this actually came from Nancy, so you might wanna talk a little bit about these feedback terminals.
Sure.
I thought it was kinda cool.
We were looking at, a lot of places you go, you can just punch a button, and so looking for just a very easy way to get simple but important information is they have these little desktop terminal things that you can put. So obviously we could put one in planning, we could put one at parking, we can put one in finance. What else did I say? I can't remember now. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
think that was it.
I contacted and there's a number of companies. I just contacted one company.
Right.
The cost per terminal is about $200. But there's just some options of very easy things that we can do. And quite honestly, as soon as people are being measured, performance tends to follow that measurement.
That's true.
It's like a placebo. The behavior impact is affected by this. So it's just some technological ability to collect data.
Right. So like I said, I have contacted all of the department heads, and they've looked at the open access benchmarking KPIs, and again, we're trying to look at what are we currently collecting, how does it match with those KPIs, and whether or not that provides us an opportunity to use that information to compare ourselves on a broader basis. And they've also been asked to develop objectives with measurements pertaining to customer service, as I've said. For some of them, it's been a little more challenging. Exactly, they know that they want to measure their customer service, but they're not always sure exactly what the vehicle is that's going to be best able to gather that information.
If I could say one more thing about those little terminals, another thing that's attractive about them is we tend to hear the complaints.
Right.
And these terminals would also collect information on you get 100%, well, close to 100% responses, and you'd see what percentage is negative versus what percentage is positive. So I think that it's as important to collect the positive so you continue doing what is good.
Right. And I think that the goal was to have it right there at the interaction, so it doesn't require a whole lot of extra effort on behalf of the citizen that's there to do their business. So these are just some other examples of customer service targets.
Industry standard stuff.
Yeah, these are things that are being done all over. So I guess in conclusion, really, there's a lot of work that goes into how you do this. I think it's really important that we have good measures, that we don't have a lot of measures, at least to start, so that we can get good information and we can track exactly how, making sure that it's gathered well, and that it's providing us the information that we want before we go into a whole lot of detail. And it's gonna take some time. And so, the next question is, if we really wanna, if we use Plan Manitou, it might not be as involved, but if we're looking at vision, mission, goals, objectives, and then translating that down to KPIs, that's a fairly exhaustive process. And there's people that make a living helping us do that. And I think that somebody like Tammy could do that, who worked with us before. But, you know, is there any interest in hiring outside help? Are you okay with the speed with which we are working? And I guess really, you know, I'm just trying to get an idea about what your pleasure is with regard to how we continue to work this. My staff is already coming to me going, oh, which ones do they want? I said, we haven't gotten that far yet. But there's a number of, you know, you can start going through them, Nancy, and show. I mean, you all got them, and I have more. I mean, forget, I fixed that one. Yeah, but not, but you don't have the fixed one, but I did fix it. So the city clerk, Donna went out and did some investigation because none of the KPIs that I had on the benchmarking really applied to her. So, you know, were you involved in that at all, Jamie? Okay. Okay, so hers is all about processing, how quickly they process, how accurately they process. I mean, there are different areas that they work at. Public Works, looking at, you know, capital projects completed on time and budget, timeliness of dealing with work orders. Basically, Roy's looking at, you know, how satisfied the people are that attend, you know, that come to the recreation center. Emergency response time with fire department training, which is also key, and that's a very common measure on throughout, but I'd say through law enforcement and fire community. Again, we didn't have much in the benchmarking, and so Kim went out and found several more that really were in the planning department, and she tried to spread them since she has, you know, she has people in the zoning area and also in code enforcement, so she tried to kind of share that across all the different areas that she has. And then finance. They've already started tracking the number of people that come in and the different areas that they're asking about, because one of the things that happens is their office kind of, not surprising, I'm sure you all know this, their office kind of by default serves to be the kind of the reception area coming in. And so they're kind of tracking that, and they are, in many cases, the face of Manitou for somebody who first comes into City Hall. So how people feel about that is gonna be important, about how they feel about the city. But they're actually starting to track the numbers, just to get a sense of how much time they're actually spending on their business versus all the other business. So, you know, one of the things that could come out of that is some recommendation that we do something to try to provide some more information, potentially. That's one of the things that could happen. Go ahead.
That's kind of
Is that the end? I also had administration and events just provide me some tonight. You don't have it because that's the original. But I can send that out too, because I just got it tonight right before I came. So
Ms. Ash, what's your suggestion of how we move forward?
well, I guess the first thing is I think we should probably, and maybe independently, we could do it and have a discussion together. I would like a decision about whether Plan Manitou is the right document for us to begin in terms of whether or not that's the strategic plan moving forward, that we could then translate into, you know, how these goals and objectives and, that's number one. If not, then I would recommend that we set aside some time, and we probably still should, but it'll be differently focused, to create that vision, mission, goals and objectives, and around what council wants to accomplish over some period of time, whatever that is, and then figure out how we have key performance indicators that move us in that direction. You know, you could say something like, you know, you want, I don't think that's one, but just, well, look at your.
Heard the argument, or at least the discussion about Plan Manitou and
Right.
its role in this. I would absolutely think that's where we would start.
Okay.
But that's my opinion.
Right, and well, and I come from you know, I was not intimately involved in the creation or evolution of that, and so I'm not as familiar with exactly how that would fit. But I certainly am not averse to using that as the, you know, basically as the foundation for the things we build from there.
So let's see if we can come to consensus
Okay.
about that issue first.
Okay.
And then we can, because the topics that I think you were asking me to relate to are all covered in Plan Manager.
Okay, great.
So what's your thought in terms of using that as a foundational document to help develop these?
I would, we spent a lot of time on that, so I think I would do that, but also, I would like to see a really big impact on customer service, such as you made examples for, you know, projects that, you know, in your previous life, where cards were given out to individuals saying how
Oh,
to
yeah.
do on this project. I'd also like to see, because I don't know if we're just depending upon the, what is it, the Manitou one, next door for advising people of things. It just seems to me that, you know, the biggest complaints I get is, such as yesterday, you know, they had a water outage, nobody was aware of it. Are we doing door hangers when we have planned things? Are we notifying people in those areas, hey, tomorrow you're gonna be without water? It just seems like if we did just the simple little things, and then continue to grow off of that, that we're gonna have a better, community's gonna be looking at us a lot better instead of going, wow, I came home today and my water was off, I had no clue it was off, till I look on next door. You know how the things are just operated easily, and I guess I see them easily operated, and why don't we do that?
So use Plan Manager as a foundational.
Correct, but I think we use that as a foundation, but directing customer service as a priority in there.
Yeah, cause we wouldn't have a lot of customer service information, I'm guessing, in Plan Manager. So using that as a
Right.
separate definite, we want to move forward on customer service is what I'm hearing.
You know,
Right.
improving the communication that we're giving right now.
Okay, others?
I'm fine with Plan Manitou being the foundation. We've invested in it.
Anybody else want to know? No, foundation of what again?
It's the strategy map, it's really kind of telling us what your immediate, I mean, Plan Manitou is really about there's a vision associated with it, right? And there's goals associated with what you want to accomplish, and so it's trying to figure out, you know, cause a lot of the measures that you saw up there tonight, although some of them were customer service, are also about how well how the department is gonna evaluate their overall performance, and probably isn't as specific to Plan Manitou. And so we'll have to go kind of regroup and figure out, okay, what's this department's role in achieving these objectives associated with Plan Manitou, and then how will we measure how effective we are in our role, in our performance.
Can we bring it down, can we use Plan Manager as a start and then bring it down to the department level?
Right.
As you just described.
And probably employee level, and to a large extent.
It just seems like a really big document for some of these things. I think as a foundation, sure, but there's gonna be a lot of work for us to do.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, are we as a group wanting to move forward to do that work? We don't have to, but that's the question. Anybody else want to weigh in?
Sit in our plan.
It is, I think, key performance indicators, I believe, of some sort is in
I
there.
can't remember,
I'd have to go back
I
and
don't have my
double check,
plan with
but
us
I
tonight.
think that was, cause Malcolm had started this process, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking he put it on there, but we need to address it.
Sure.
Yep.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
Are you interested in any external help? I'm not gonna get very far.
Maybe,
So-
Mr. Todd could take that on.
It's gonna be a long time.
It is, it's a big process, and if you really wanna get it to where it's most effective, you really have to push it down to an employee level, and really get to the point where an employee understands what we're trying to achieve as a city, and how they contribute to that and what actions they need to take in order to make it successful. That's ideal, and I can, to a person that I've talked to about this, they would very much like that.
So, I think I heard a consensus, not everybody weighed in on using Plan Mana to the extent that it's relevant.
Right.
Certainly we want to be consistent with it, so to the extent it's relevant, I think I heard a consensus to use that. The next question is, do we want to allocate some resources to bring in an outside consultant to help us that, or do we want to leave that to the city administrator to work into their work plan?
It's too early to say. It's, no, I don't think we've got good, and we're gonna take a crack at it. We probably need to, we don't have a good vision, and, mission statement and vision, to me, they're not concise enough. It's very big. Because I think Plan Manitou is very big. It's a great document for tracking things that we want to accomplish, but not.
So how would you like to suggest we move forward then with it?
I think we should look at what other cities have for their stuff. Most of the ones I've looked at are very short and concise.
We've collected 40 pages of that.
Well, no, he's talking, I think you're talking about vision and mission statements,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, he's
Oh, I'm
talking
sorry.
vision and mission
I
statements.
thought you were referring to.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what I heard.
Sure.
Yeah, vision and mission statements, and using Plan Manitou as the base, I'm fine with that. And that's gotta be our piece. Whatever happens after that is how it gets interpreted from our departments and city administrator. I think we'll need some help eventually. It's too early to say what kind of help we're gonna need.
So are you suggesting, what process would you like to suggest moving forward? Do you want to suggest we allocate some time during our regular meeting? We schedule another retreat, so to speak, to hammer that out? I think that Tammy, when she was here, said, we took that off
Right.
of the last discussion because we had other issues we need to talk about.
Right.
But she suggested she could help us start that process. It is a lengthy process as well, but typically would require X number of hours, quite a few, to work through that. And I think she'd be glad to help us, or we could find somebody else. She's a reasonable cost, which is done.
Yes, right. We feed her.
Right. So, what's your pleasure, folks, in terms of how you'd like to move forward?
I think I'd like to see us do this in work sessions, in chunks, over time.
Work sessions in chunks over time. And how much time would you like to allocate for each work session?
10 minutes?
10 minutes? Okay.
No, an hour? I mean, whatever anybody thinks is appropriate. I'd say an hour is the least. I think if we get much more than that, we're gonna get bogged down and not much accomplished.
Okay, so you'd like to allocate an hour for some number of work sessions to work through this. Okay, other thoughts?
I would do work sessions, and I would agree with the hour, and probably just make those, on a frequent basis, so we can get through this. Not just one next month, maybe we need to justify what we got in the work session, we put an hour, maybe in every work session, so we can get through this, so we can continue on, and I would like to see if Tammy would wanna be involved in it, because she would be a big help, maybe get us.
She would. It's probably a little awkward to invite her down for a series of 1 hour sessions. That would be a little bit difficult, I would think.
Well, maybe
She might be able to Skype in or call in or something, so it's certainly possible we could engage her in some way, at least to get us started maybe.
Right, I think maybe get us started, and then if we need to go longer in a work session, then we just commit ourselves to going longer so we can get this done,
Okay.
cause it's important.
Anybody else wanna weigh in?
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, so what I'm hearing, on the process forward,
My concern is that, just like when we did the budget, it, proved to be very inefficient and frustrating when we tried to do it in chunks over work sessions. I think that this is a similar thing. I think that we would get, I think it would be very inefficient and frustrating. way to get it done. If we truly want to get this done, I think we have to commit in a big way. I personally would rather look at the cost of hiring someone who's very skilled in this sort of a process, in this sort of a tool that the city could use could help us really accelerate things. I think that would be much more efficient and effective.
Anyone else? I would tend to agree. I think an hour chunks it's gonna be challenging to do in an hour chunks. I've not heard of doing it that way, but we could try it for a couple hours, and if we don't, if we're not satisfied with the result, we could always change it.
So how many hours would you think, I personally commit to this, to where we get it done? I mean, what do you think? And say, you think it would be a 20-hour project? You think it would be a 16-hour project? I mean,
Depends on how you're defining the scope of the project. If we're sticking it to a vision and mission,
And I think goals.
and goals, that's different than if we're talking about working through all of the KPIs and so forth. Obviously, a bigger project that way.
right.
But if you define it as just to figure out council's vision, mission, and strategic goals,
Strategic goals.
I'm guessing 3 to
So if we
4
started
hours.
there and we just committed, say, a longer period, 2 or 3 times to get it done. I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to spend, a whole 8 hours on it, because I think we probably, we can go astray sometimes. If we stay in a shorter time span for us, we stay focused. So,
Well-
I mean, if it was a 4-hour commitment to do it this time, and we had 3 of those to maybe get these done, I would be willing to commit to that. And not, like you say, because I tend to agree, last year, years before, in the past budgets, just bringing the budgets into it, breaking those up, wasn't the best way to go. And we've learned that, and that's why we did them in a couple of sessions on a Saturday, which we were more productive because we stayed in task, which I understand and I agree with that. I think, if we're gonna do this, we just need to do it and get it done. So I just commit X amount of hours or X amount of time, and here we go.
And I think we could do it, but I would suggest we have some outside help to do it. That would certainly keep us on track.
Right.
Would bring in some expertise about, some issues, that would help.
That
So,
was gonna be my
I'm hearing
suggestion.
2 different things here. I'm hearing a proposal to allocate an hour each work session for X number of hours. I'm hearing some discussion about to try to,
I was on the hour until we brought in the budget, and so I totally agree with the budget thing, so
I totally agree, that makes sense. Committing to it outside of our regular council meetings, though, is painful.
what's your pleasure?
So what's the proposal, a weekend or a weekday, just Tuesday, 4 hours, 5 hours?
I would, for this, I would adjust my schedule to work with you guys. But if they wouldn't brought in I was on track for the hour, but until they brought the budget thing in, and I went, oh, that didn't work at all. We'd be going down the same track.
So a fine Saturday golfing morning, you've given up?
And, I've tried to golf for the last 3 weeks, and I was gonna golf today. It didn't work, so.
We could just pick a snowy Saturday morning.
Well, if I say I'm gonna go golfing, it's gonna snow. So that's all I gotta do.
Alright, folks, so yes, to allocate, we don't quite know, and we probably go back to Tammy and say, hey, if we're gonna tackle this, how much time would you suggest? That's probably,
I would first find out if Tammy is amenable and skilled at, if she feels comfortable in working this sort of thing.
I think she would, but let's clarify that, so, from her. And also how much time she might recommend, to do it. And I I'm hearing it's painful, and I'm hearing that, yes, you'd be willing to do it, or is it too painful, you don't wanna do it?
I'll do it.
You'll do it.
I'll do it. I'm reluctant to keep hiring people to help us do stuff, but, you know, we hired her to get us started, I suppose that's okay.
Well,
I think, you know,
She's free.
she's free.
We,
That's right. That's right. Food.
Food.
Yeah, but even so, it's not the money, it's like, you know, it's like hiring yet another consultant, it's like we can't do anything without hiring somebody. So that's just my take
Just as a
on
point
it.
of comparison, I've invested probably 10-15 hours in helping, a minimum. Leah's invested quite a few hours in it already. So, just to get to this point, because we both needed a lot of education in it. So, if you consider our time free, I'm not probably going to invest my time in it much anymore.
I think what you pay for, or not necessarily pay for, but what you get when you bring someone in like this is somebody who's got a lot of experience. It's the same reason you call a plumber, or you have a mechanic work on your car.
It's been
And it's
my
not a
family.
reflection, I hear he's being frustrated about it, but these aren't things, new councils every time shouldn't be coming in creating vision, mission, new goals and objectives. The stuff that you're creating ought to be foundational for a long time moving forward. The specific objectives, specific goals might change somewhat, but the overarching stuff should stay pretty much the same.
We've done a lot of that.
Okay, so I guess the key is, but how you translate that, there are people who have a lot of expertise in how to do that to make you all more efficient. So we don't stumble through it, they make sure that we don't go down the rat holes and we actually make the best use of our time. So that's where the value is. We can get out our, plumbing 101 and try to fix it too, but obviously we're not as fast as somebody that does it for a living. So that would be my comparison.
Plus it would get me out on the golf course sooner.
Absolutely.
Okay, so do we have, I'm not sure I'm hearing from Susan and Jay that you would like to commit to a retreat of X number of hours to work through this?
I would prefer a weeknight, if we could block 4 hours on a weeknight, and if we needed to do it again, weeknights are a little easier for me. That's just my personal preference. I think Tammy, the cost of food and her expertise is valuable, and I think she did a good job with our last retreat of listening and teasing out the important topics to dig deeper into.
Well, I'm gonna say weeknight if that's best for her. My weekends are
You
all
could say
gone
what's best for
anyway.
you and we could come to consensus about it.
My weekends are almost all taken anyway, so weeknights are fine, and if that works for Susan, that's fine with me.
Alright,
I'll do a weeknight.
It just depends on weeknight.
okay. So we would move forward to look for a weeknight, which would be starting, it would be approximately, I'm just guessing, 3 to 4 hours. Which means presumably we would wanna start at 4 or 5, I would think. Is that your understanding of what a weeknight means?
Sure.
Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Alright. Ms. Ash, do you need any further direction?
Nope, I have it all down in my commitment.
Thank you. Alright, we'll call item 11, to authorize the mayor to sign a letter of support, reestablishing the U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs. This was brought to me by Mayor Suthers. There is a letter of support that he has drafted. The current version of the letter, most recently that I've seen, has signatures from the mayors of Woodland Park, Fountain, Monument, Colorado Springs. I may be missing one.
Can I make a motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to authorize the mayor to sign a letter in support of reestablishing the U.S. Space Command in Colorado Springs.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, you vote. Motion passes 5 to 1. City Administrator report.
Okay, I wanted to give you an update on, the situation with Al Foster. I did meet, Public Services employees and brought my friend, Andrew Kripe, who is also the leak search supervisor for the city of Colorado Springs. And we did dig, at the hydrant, above, Mr. Foster's property. We dug down about 4 feet to the lateral and then at least 2 to 3 feet below it. We found no water. The ground was moist, but when you get down 7 feet, it is. But there was nothing running. Mr. Foster was disappointed. There were several times when I had to have him stay away from the ditch. He was trying to stand too close and trying to kneel over, and it was deep enough to where he could have hurt himself if he got too close. He wanted us to keep the ditch open for 24 hours, which I did not want to do, just for a variety of reasons, including support of the pipe that's in there, which is under a lot of pressure. I basically told him in person that we didn't find the water. Subsequent to our visit, I wasn't there at the time, but the KRS, the people who actually installed the pipe there, came up and also agreed that there was no leak and there was no water there. And as I indicated in the letter that I sent him, I told him that if we didn't find water, that this basically closed the book on this situation. That I was sorry that we weren't able to do more to really, alleviate his problem, but from best that I can tell is that it is groundwater. That's what I hear from the experts. And I have to agree that that is the issue. As far as I'm concerned, I'm recommending that the issue be closed.
Any questions for Ms. Ash concerning that? I did speak to Mr. Foster today, and
Yes.
will pass along his appreciation to City Council for everything we've done. He doesn't agree with the conclusion, but does appreciate the efforts that City Council has made.
And I think there was a very strong support and of the employees and everyone else up there trying to make sure that we did everything. We went above and beyond what we had originally said we were doing. We dug 2 feet below where we were going to, et cetera, trying to address his concerns, and we just didn't find anything. So, second, I wanted to give you an early update on Narrows Road. I wasn't able to move on that quite as quickly because my primary information source is Shelley, and she was on vacation for about a week, and then I think she told me she had over 2,000 emails when she came back, and so she's been a little overwhelmed, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about kind of where we are with that. I'm in the process of making sure that we update all the information about all the addresses and property owners that had paid toward, I think it's $600+. So I want to verify all of that. I want to verify exactly who all has signed those agreements and who hasn't. And then we'll be reviewing that, reviewing our options and next steps. Right now, it's my understanding, and I'll ask you since you're the source of this information, this is the issue about paving a private road, and I think you're familiar with that. You've given us some advice before, Jeff.
Quite a while ago.
Quite a while ago,
Yeah.
but the issue was that at least the way it's been conveyed to me, and I haven't looked at any actual documents yet, but that basically if all the property owners don't sign, we can't really pave the road. There may be, because it is a private road and we really don't have any without permission and releases, which is I think what you prepared, we really don't have the right to go in there and do that, so.
If that's what I said, that's probably correct.
Right,
I just-
and that's my
The
understanding.
reason why I'm saying that is because I think it was a couple of years ago
Right.
that we talked, and I just
Right.
didn't have a quick recall like I
Yes.
used to in my
Yes.
young days. But, if you normally do an assessment and, it'll just force the charge on property owners, but if it's a private road, that was different.
Right.
So,
And so there may be a few other options. There's a couple of people there's a couple property owners on one side of the culvert that have signed that maybe one of the options is you could pave that little section because it's entirely covered by people, but the other property owners, without further review, but it looks like there's one at the beginning, there's one in the middle, and there's one at the end, which means that you can't do anything. And so if all of this proves to be true, and I have not verified it yet, I would like to basically take city staff out of the process and provide information back to that neighborhood and say, these are the issues, this is what it'll take to be done, give them a period of time in order to expedite that, or do whatever they need, and then say that if they're not able to accomplish that within that period of time, that we're just gonna refund their money. We're gonna give their money back to them. And if they would prefer that we give their money back sooner, then we can do that. That's kind of where I think we're at. Okay? I wanted to let you know today that I sat through 3 interviews for the Deputy Public Works Director, so I'm excited about getting that person on board. I'm meeting with the potential, I say, interim police chief, because I have to start negotiating a contract tomorrow with him. I wanted to really let you know that I'm looking at hiring some additional seasonals for public services. I feel like we really need that given our current issue with vacancies and illness and whatever. We're looking at using an agency to get at least a couple of them on board before the holiday, because frankly, we haven't had any luck with our advertising. Everybody out there is advertising for seasonal workers, and our salaries just aren't so outstanding that people, in fact, we've had a couple of positions, actually regular positions, that people have accepted and called us up on the day they were supposed to show up and said they took another job that paid more. So we've been assured by one agency that we can get at least 2, and that's kind of what we're looking for, to get them on board before the holiday. That's the goal. And we're pursuing some other leads to get some help, people's referrals, call this person, do that, so we're trying to do some of that. And then the last thing I wanted to do,
what are we paying seasonals?
about 13 to start. But I wanted to go over our commitments and what's still outstanding. There was I'm going back to May 7th, that was the last one, and I marked the ones that will be complete. I updated you on the narrow road, but it's not complete yet, so you know about that one. The second one was develop a Metro District parking lot leasing proposal within 30 days. That means that was due on June 7th, and that was supposed to be me and Susan and Bill and Mr. Mayor, and I don't think we've met to talk about that. And is that one that we need to just put on hold, permanent hold? Okay. Update Manitou Springs sign on Highway 24 in Cedar Heights. I've got Shelley working on that. I just gave her the actual address, so that one's supposed to be done by June 1st. I'm not sure it will be, but she's going to be assessing that. I'll give you that update. Develop the Canyon Avenue Art Project MOU with Smoke Brush, and that was supposed to be Kim and Smoke Brush and potentially the Manitou Springs Art Council. That's supposed to be done by the 7th of June. I haven't done anything on that.
With the agreement?
Yeah, the MOU.
It's been drafted.
Okay.
By the Kim.
Okay.
And I'm not sure where it's gone.
Okay, great. Okay, that's good news. Let's see. Provide timeline with end date for disposition of the COG cars, and I know Nancy, we did a discussion last time about that. There's no date on it, so. Provide a timeline to request and collect ideas for crazy COG ideas. That came up last time, there's no date on that.
We've not met since the last time.
Okay.
Since we presented.
And then, update the proposed marijuana license ordinance per feedback from council on 5/14, and that obviously was done today, so. That's where we are on all of our things, the outstanding ones. The rest of them are complete.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Nash.
I'm done.
Council correspondence, Mr. Smith?
Pretty good.
You good?
Nothing.
Laura?
URA seems to be finally moving along a little bit. Their director is on the ball, and is excited about some proposals that are people talking about. So there's movement going on in the URA, which is fabulous news.
You might bring back to them, and I've mentioned this to them, that they have a vacancy. They know they have a vacancy. It's been vacant since December. I've asked them to submit something in terms of what criteria they would like, but we've given them about 60 days now to come up with that, and hopefully they'll be able to
I actually have someone who's potentially interested in that.
come up with some criteria, what expertise they want. They're not I've suggested them, I didn't think it was appropriate to let the vacancy just go forever and have 6 people, so we have a deadline now of 60 days. So hopefully we'll hear from them and be able to make an appointment.
Sure. And what's the 6 days for? To find somebody or just to come up with criteria?
Come up with the criteria and or recommendations of people who they would like to propose.
All right. Sure, they have the criteria. It's in their documents. Who the kind of person they want on their board already. So I'll when I get to the next one, I will bring it.
And I did mention that to Ms. Nichols.
And I'm meeting Leslie next week, and need to get up with my Delane and ask him what's going on with the Arts Council. But that's it.
Okay.
I have 2 things. I have talked to, last week we decided that we could all agree that the overnight parking on Manitou Avenue really needed to be looked at so that it could provide some relief at least overnight. Kim Johnson has begun work on that. I talked to a number of downtown residents who were a little shocked that we actually said we wanted to move forward with that, but once that wore off, they were elated. And I've had some good conversations about that, so, just kind of a recap, Bill Carter asked that it be fast-tracked and get on the June 3rd, parking meeting, and Kim has come back and basically said it's too complex for that, and that's because it involves so many different departments. It'll have to involve SP Plus as a vendor. Public Works has to really be able to do the job that they need to do for street sweeping and snow removal. Since SP Plus doesn't do overnight enforcement, the police department has to be involved. So it's complex, but the reaction has been good and we are moving forward on that. The other thing that we did last week, which I volunteered to help for, is we're going to start using those stencils, just the little T's, as they call them, around town where we have a lot of cool little areas where there's some free spaces, but it's just people don't know where they are in terms of where to park and how to make the most of them. So I met Jared for the first time, and he was amazing. He was a person in streets who's working on that. The contractors that they had were super helpful and really on top of it. They were good to the neighbors while they were asking people to move their cars around. We're creating these to be the minimum size. So, there's all kinds of regulations for parking spaces, but we're going with minimum to try to maximize these spaces, but also make it very clear to people, park here, and then another car parks here, and we got 3 cars here. And we even came up with some creative solutions for some small spaces and created some motorcycle parking, instead of just painting it yellow and saying, well, it's not big enough for a space, and wasting it. And I think motorcycles are pretty efficient. So it's a good thing to maybe encourage a few more of those spaces around town. So 2 things happening. I think Leslie is good with Shelley in terms of where we are with downtown. That's been my barometer for, and I understand that Gardner is getting busy. So that's, we're making progress with that too.
Okay.
Okay. The Housing Authority Board met the same night that we did the Who's Interested in Being on Council night, and we had a full house. We really should have been in a big room. But there's 2 planned developments coming in that we all should be aware of. One of them is the Dillon Motel. Behind the Dillon Motel. The Dillon Motel is going to stay the Dillon Motel. Pool's going to stay. I don't know about the newer buildings, but the same gentleman who owns the Dillon is looking at putting in a planned tiny house development behind it. And Kim Johnson was saying, what you need is a planned, a PUD, a planned unit development plan, actually. And Manitou doesn't have that. She said, I've never worked for a city that doesn't have these within the city. So she's looking for money, and I think she's finding it within her own budget to hire someone to help her fast track that. There was a lot of interest for it. It was a little over the top, and then he was thinking he could put in 36 units there. We're going, holy smokes. But anyway, it was the first initial public meeting. It was really, I mean, for me, as who I am, and supporting tiny houses and seeing them as solutions for some of the things, I thought it was great. The other one coming in, which you guys have probably already heard about, was Cheyenne Village. Cheyenne Village is leaving. The brilliance of their work is that you don't sequester these people away from the community, you disperse them into the community. So they're dispersing their clients, and they're giving it up. And this is the old it's the log cabin district. So you can't go in and just tear everything down again. Kim doesn't have what she needs to help these people move forward. There was a huge crowd, and people were ready for a fight, where you could just tell, you could feel it. And Corrine was just so skillful with that whole group, and I think everybody left feeling heard, feeling relieved. And one of the biggest things that relieved them is one woman I remember just shouted out of the crowd going, I worked really hard for my house in Manitou, and I don't want poor people living in the neighborhood with me, or something like that. And this guy goes, well, you have to understand that we're trying to do something that's good for Manitou, and there's property outside of the log cabin that is totally open for, high density apartments. And they all went, ooh. So that kind of gave them a little pause of like, maybe we'll see what these people are coming up with. And they're coming up with, their plan was to keep all the buildings that are good in good shape and refurbish them without changing them, maybe making a couple of them duplexes. And it might be senior housing, they're really not sure. Again, this is their first presentation publicly. So it was a very exciting meeting. It was really great. And Corrine is a superstar when it came. I thought I was gonna have to duck out or wear an egg, but I didn't. And then last night we had the open space, which is an equally good group. I can't tell you how much fun those meetings are. So it was just basically an average meeting. They're talking about the reclamation plans. They are working on the Intamin Trail. It won't happen until the end of the season. More like in September, they're going to take out all those steps. And they're going to reroute the trail and look at the water, damage that's been done and how the water system comes down, and working on that. Let's see here. They talked about signage. The signage is all over the board. Everybody talks about signage, and I don't know who's going to finally bring it in. But they talked a little bit about that and just talked about their reports, and they are at the group. Sorry. And they started talking about budget, so they're on the right track. Beyond that, the beekeepers met last week. There's already local groups, such as the Pollinator Project is offering money to some of these beekeepers. Pikes Peak Permaculture is going to be offering money to help get more beehives going. Melody Doherty, who you guys have seen in the audience, that she's addressed this before, has been talking to individual businesses about bees, and we have many flat top roofs, and why could we not have bees on top of roofs? And Rachel Buller's all for it. Randy was telling me tonight he was all for it. So we're looking at the whole movement around the bees is to repopulate the town with more hives and get better communication and better maybe education for the beekeepers. There were a lot of baby beekeepers that lost their bees. And so, but there were also people that have been keeping bees for decades who lost their bees. Other than that, the other thing that and we haven't talked about this, and I can't talk to it very well, Jay can talk to it better than me, is I've been getting people really, really concerned about, and I think it has to do with the pipe that's going under the road carrying all the cables, the 5Gs, and which is the high-speed internet kind of event. You have to have these, power modules or whatever you call them, all along the way. So you have EMFs, which I don't know if you guys are aware of that or afraid of that. Well, you know about them.
I do.
I was on my mind all the way to Australia, just getting those things pounded into my head from every direction. So there's people that are going, maybe we don't want that. Are you familiar with the 5Gs and the whole waves that you don't see that are moving through the atmosphere? They don't know if it affects bees, they don't know if it affects birds or animals. People feel affected themselves, and those are the people that are calling me.
I've heard from citizens as well who have concerns about that.
Concerns. Yeah, so we haven't talked about it, and maybe we should get some more information and talk about it before we get too far down the road, like, oh, this is all coming in, ain't it
Well, and
great?
there are already, not so much 5G, but there are, people looking at fiber optic in Manitou.
I know.
And I know Natalie's been kind of spearheading what we're calling the big fiber group, just so we can coordinate, so that we don't have each one coming in trying to do something, and whether or not out of that coordination, they can actually, maybe the city itself can get something out of it, like an additional conduit that would just belong to us. And then I know that, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but Jeff just sent me the Comcast agreement, and so it's also how that fits in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a memo.
There's a lot.
A memo on the Comcast.
A memo on the Comcast.
Because we don't have an
Okay.
agreement.
Okay.
Well, and beyond that.
I knew you sent me something on it, I hadn't read it yet.
That's okay.
Beyond that, Leah, would be a discussion about what is the downside of doing this stuff, and is it something we really want?
But right now, they're not, the people that are talking to us aren't talking 5G, not at the moment.
So the problem is whether or not it's a utility. So Jeff needs to tell us if it's a regulated utility in such a way that we don't have any choice but to accept it. Because if a telephone company comes in, you really don't have a choice but to accept it, that they're coming in to your community. And I suspect this is a similar thing. The best we can do, according to HR Green, is put together some policies about where they're going to go, not if they're going to go.
Yeah, that's generally right.
Well, we should do that, and I think we should also look at all the information, if we can get that information. I mean, some of this EMF stuff is pretty ethereal, it's like,
We
where
maybe
is
talking
it?
two different things, I guess. I think we need some information about whether the fiber optic is providing the same things that you're
It's
talking
not
about.
the same, but I think it's the same avenue. So I'm just saying, we should get at least in front of it, and know what we're talking about, and decide what we should do. It's like, okay, if 5Gs are coming, they're gonna be along the main avenue and nowhere else, which is not gonna happen because we
They're
buried
pretty
everything.
close.
It's pretty close to Chuck. You'd have to go
You
all
have to
across
have
town,
them
you'd have
close
to go
together.
all the way to Crystal Hills.
Yeah, and so
Pretty much every third telephone pole would have something.
so how do we deal with that? I mean, how do we get that? Are you writing this down, Mr. Elder?
We're not gonna solve that problem tonight, so thank you for bringing it
No,
up.
but we should talk about it.
You do have telecom regulations, you have regulations on small cell facilities, and then we've done a new ordinance for you to deal with the changes to the law that I think should be coming your way after planning is finished this review. So it does address, there's a recent FCC opinion that addresses how you can regulate it, but so we're updating your code to give you the most authority you can have, basically. So
Perfect.
it's subject to federal law, so you have limited authority.
Right.
Some, for sure.
Well, and getting the information out there is important.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just thought of two quick
Okay,
things.
hold on one second. Anything else?
No, that was it.
Thank you.
Just let everybody know that I was contacted by Farley from Adams Mountain and had a concern of the fence. But as all the emails, I think you've probably seen that the owner of that property went through all planning and got permission to do his fence and all that. And I basically told her that as a council person, there's nothing we can do. Nothing I can do, and I can listen to you, but that's about it. And I think she understands that. The other issue was the issue I brought up last Tuesday about the primary service line going into where the new hotel is gonna go next to Moe's, and that the paving was gonna happen. And we talked about this a year ago, and it never happened, so now we got a brand new paved road. There's gonna be something that we're gonna have to look at of, you're gonna see a cut in a brand new paved roadway, which is concerning, so. That's all. I'm done.
Thank you. I have two quick items. One, just to give you an update on Surgery King Drive. They do expect to have that open by Memorial Day. However, it will, be closed, again, they're not able to get the paving done, so they're gonna pave the down up ramp and the section from the whole thing, they'll pave the whole thing, but they couldn't get it done before Memorial Day. And, so they asked if it'd be okay if we open the road, they'll get their crew in, it'll be a maximum of 2 to 3 days, they'll close it again, and then it'll be done. We also discussed, the treatment between the road and the creek, and they're gonna line the boulders there. Shelley Cobal was there, and she was suggesting, having the cars parked, adjacent to the creek would not be her preference, so it'll be like it was before. Basically, the boulders will be put back to protect that, and then there'll be a walking area, so you'll be able to pretty much walk on that side there, up that road. I think that's all. Serpentine, you all should have received an invitation, hopefully, to the Historic Preservation Awards on this Thursday. Hopefully someone from council can go. I'm going to be out of town.
I'll be there.
But that would be
We
great.
have nominated.
Oh, well, good.
There you go.
Congratulations.
That's all I have. Future agendas, obviously we have some future agenda items that are listed down there. Oh, I thought she said she did.
Okay.
Anything else? If not-
Would you like me to review our commitments?
Sure.
Okay. So, I'm supposed to check on Intamin Trail around the middle school condition, check on the Ute Pass Trail, and I'm supposed to check in with OSAC on both. Jeff is gonna prepare a draft ordinance on parking enterprise fund. I'm gonna look for some sample city vision mission statements. And I'm gonna check with Tammy on how much time she might need. Does she feel comfortable with helping us on our work around mission vision? What is her availability? And then we'll be looking after I kinda know what her availability is, then I can go back and check with you all about a weeknight, assuming that she's the right person for 3 to 4 hours.
Great.
I wrote down a future meeting, maybe an update on Big Fiber. We've had a couple of meetings with Verizon and Zayo and a few others. And investigate the cut in the pavement. Can you give me more detail about where that is?
It's right down in the,
Or I'll talk to you after.
It's where the new motel is proposed,
yeah, it's a new motel,
right adjacent to the other motel, Comfort Inn.
right next to Moe's Cafe.
Right.
Diversity.
Next to Lowe's Cafe, okay. I just needed a,
I think it's a new Holiday Inn that's supposed to go in.
It
there.
is a Holiday Inn.
If I could give you just some other information on the Ute Trail, I passed on to Shelley Cobal some time ago that they left the pieces of cut up pipe just in piles up on Ute Trail, and I think they were supposed to remove those. They also left a very dangerous situation where they cut off a piece of pipe, and it now is in the, I shouldn't say the middle of the trail, but it is in the trail itself, right down from the water treatment plant. There's a piece of cut up pipe sticking up out of there.
okay,
I've mentioned those two things to her, but they're still existing.
okay.
So
Well,
hopefully in some Ute Trail work, they can figure that out.
okay.
Anything else?
Yeah,
Yes.
shout out to Shelley, she got the big gap in the sidewalk at Canyon Avenue fixed. And there was something else walking around town I saw that she fixed, that was a big bush there by poppy seeds been chopped up. There's something else.
I did that.
I did that, there was something else I saw walking around.
You said chopped up, what do you mean chopped up?
It was overgrown and getting in the way of the sidewalk.
been
and
trimmed.
It's been trimmed.
Properly.
Yes.
Yeah, it doesn't look great because it's taken too long, but it's gotten trimmed.
It may not have been done properly.
Yes, it was properly.
All right,
So,
anything else?
there was something I brought to Kai's attention, and I assume he will move it forward, is there are stress cracks in the concrete of the Park Avenue Bridge. And I only noticed it because of the moisture that was on the bridge that day, because the day before I didn't notice it, it just became a weird pattern, and I stopped and looked at it. So I brought to his attention, I don't know what it means, but there you go.
There you go. Okay, anything else?
The bridge won't fall
Not-
into your.
Or adjourned?
The bridge will not fall.
3 minutes early, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
it's concrete.
Yes, 9:27.
This is
the pavement, this is the company.